The greatest hero on the planet has decided it's time to hunt down his old allies. He calculates the attack coldly and ruthlessly. With his sights locked on, he watches his victims as they rest, completely oblivious to the nightmare about to begin. Sensing the threat, the father attempts to shatter any illusion of safety. He reveals the harsh truth. The traitor used to be their leader. Because of that, he knows every secret and escape route. The family is completely exposed against a nearly omnipotent force. The punishment strikes without warning. With a millisecond of ruthless precision, the promise of a safe haven is annihilated in the blink of an eye. Half the family is wiped from existence all at once. It's clear there will be no room for negotiation. The father is devastated by the unthinkable loss. His mind nearly breaks at the sight of the carnage he just witnessed. However, the responsibility of holding his eldest daughter's life in his arms takes over. He is forced to swallow his grief and keep fighting for her. They seek a maximum security refuge, but the invasion breaches every barrier effortlessly. The technological defenses crumble in seconds, brutally neutralizing any escape route. It's game over, and the father completely loses control of the situation. Any attempt at a fatherly sacrifice is dismissed with pure apathy. The lethal punishment falls directly upon the family's last shield. She is left completely orphaned and hopeless at the center of this personal apocalypse. To top off the cruelty, the godlike being deals a final blow to the girl's mind. Instead of physical violence, he uses his former title as a savior, as a weapon of psychological torture. He ensures she survives only to carry this trauma forever. As the world collapses, the remnants of the resistance desperately try to fight back against the betrayal. Without their former supreme leader, they must adopt much more aggressive tactics. The battle stopped being about justice a long time ago. Now, it's a fight for pure, brutal survival against this massive threat. In desperation, the team turns to the disturbed mind of a young former ally. They force a deep dive into the boy's memories. The goal is to find the former leader's exact breaking point to understand what went wrong. The memories show the recruit displaying his core power during their old training days. He possessed a gift of perfect immortality, making him flawless for the front lines. It was the ideal skill set for anyone accompanying the most dangerous being on the planet. But the sweet illusion of the past is mercilessly shattered. The leader of the interrogation forces the boy to face the nightmare of the present. He makes it clear that this perfect hero is now the ruthless executioner, hunting and killing them all. Pushing for answers, they uncover a macabre truth. The memory block isn't psychological, it's a grotesque physical injury. Earth's greatest protector surgically destroyed his own partner's mind. He lobotomized him simply to silence any warning about the impending betrayal. Knowing there is no hope left for their ally's broken mind, the group's leader makes a difficult decision. With a heavy heart, he grants one last request for mercy. It's the end of the line for the former sidekick, who finally finds the peace he was denied for so long. Realizing that a head-on confrontation is suicide, their strategy shifts completely. Their only chance now relies on raw information. They decide to unearth the enemy's untold backstory and look for any crack in the monster's psychological armor. The first real clue surfaces among the files, echoes of a past romantic relationship of the villain. It's the thread they needed to unravel his double life. From there, the mission is split up, and the investigation officially begins. But before they can make a move, the predator finds them right in their hideout, in the midst of their grief. The force of the ambush is devastating, proving that nowhere is safe from him. There's no room to fight, only pure survival instinct screaming louder amidst the chaos. Out of combat options, at the last possible second, an emergency invention saves the team's skin. They jump into the unknown. Executing a tactical retreat, they escape certain annihilation by the skin of their teeth. What seemed like a desperate victory for the resistance reveals an even greater terror. The escape doesn't frustrate the villain in the slightest, quite the opposite. Letting the group escape with their lives was part of a much darker plan all along. The heroine Kaden leads the resistance's search for answers in the past. She uses her unique ability to channel urban legends, bringing ancient myths and ghosts to fight in the real world. All of this is because the world they knew has come to an end. That very metropolis the superhero Plutonian swore to protect was completely obliterated by him during his first psychotic break. Amidst the rubble of this former life, the investigation leads Kaden to a specific target. She tracks down the Plutonian's ex-girlfriend, someone who knew the monster intimately, better than anyone else. The girl lives in absolute panic, convinced the heroine has come to execute her on her ex's orders. Kaden needs to defuse the situation quickly and make it clear they are on the same side in this war. Now calmer, his ex-girlfriend, Alana, begins to recall how they met. The hero had personally complimented her after an attack, fascinated by how she, an ordinary civilian, managed to keep a level head under pressure. The beginning of their relationship felt like a genuine fairy tale. Alana was completely in love and charmed by how thoughtfully he treated her, giving her unique and perfect experiences. That is, until an ordinary coworker from her office decides to make a massive revelation. He confesses to being the Plutonian in disguise, fully expecting her to jump for joy at this supposedly romantic gesture. But her reaction is far from romantic. Alana feels completely betrayed when she realizes that her boyfriend has been lying to her and secretly watching her every day, completely shattering the trust in their relationship. Driven by pure rage, she makes an impulsive decision to get back at him. Alana exposes his secret to the entire floor, blowing his perfect disguise wide open in the blink of an eye. Since they worked at a radio station, the team's journalistic instincts override their common sense. Regular programming is interrupted, and the scoop of the century regarding the hero's identity is broadcast live. Desperate to contain the fallout, the hero intercepts the problem straight from the planet's orbit. He destroys the broadcasting satellite without an ounce of remorse, ensuring the secret dies in the vacuum of space. Upon returning to the newsroom, his good guy facade has completely vanished. What stands before the staff now is a cornered god consumed by paranoia, leaving a suffocating tension in the air. His sheer lack of self-awareness peaks right then and there. Completely ignoring the terror he just inflicted on innocent people, he genuinely believes everything can be fixed with a marriage proposal. Alana's rejection is immediate. With no room left for love, she sees nothing but an unstable being with zero empathy, turning her back on that illusion of a perfect romance once and for all. The terror of that day sealed her co-worker's fate. The psychological pressure and constant panic of keeping an unstable god secret drove the entire team to madness, leading them all to a tragic end. Back in the present, the story leads Alana to hand over the only loose end from the past. She reveals to Kaidan the remote location where the villain grew up, providing a crucial tactical opening for the resistance. Kaidan tries to follow protocol and offer an extraction route, but harsh reality sets in. Alana refuses the rescue, making it clear that there is no safe haven from a wrathful god. The valuable lead is immediately relayed to the resistance base. To process the data for the hunt, the head of intelligence multiplies his own body, completely ignoring his biological limits in an attempt to win this war. The Plutonian tries to fill the emotional void by demanding that everything happens exactly his way. He simulates an intimacy that no longer exists, recreating a fantasy of absolute control. The torture reaches a sickening level. The former hero has invaded an old ally's home, forcing the couple to be intimate solely for his own twisted entertainment. The husband, completely powerless, begs his wife to obey. At the height of her despair, she cries out for a savior, but the only being capable of that is the very monster torturing them. This cry for help triggers something bizarre. The most dangerous being on Earth sheds a tear, addicted to being begged and worshipped, and finally leaves, satisfied with their submission. Far away, the resistance springs into action. Twin brothers are dispatched to investigate a crucial lead at a facility on the outskirts of the city, hunting for a weakness in their former ally. The team splits up on site. One of them delves into the unknown of the abandoned complex, while the other takes position outside as the sole escape route and line of communication. But a surprise awaits in the depths. The secret bunker isn't empty. A group of low-tier supervillains has taken over the base, turning the place into a safe haven for criminals. Hidden in the shadows, the resistance scout absorbs every word. The criminals debate the audacious possibility of finding a loophole to manipulate the planet's greatest destructive force for their own gain. However, the villain's illusion of safety is short-lived. The living nightmare was already waiting for them, treating their intrusion as a mere inconvenience and inciting immediate panic. The gravity of the situation dawns on the unseen spy in the room. With the ultimate target mere inches away, he remains completely motionless, praying the fallen god won't notice his presence. When one of the scavengers makes the mistake of attacking out of panic, the retaliation is immediate. The brutal punishment serves as a sadistic reminder that any act of aggression results in instant mutilation. With absolute control over the room, the former hero uses the villains as his therapists. He unleashes his fury against humanity, which spent years demanding miracles while treating him like a trained dog. To test their potential loyalty, he hands the criminals the secret weapon created to kill him. It is the ultimate psychological game, placing his own self-destruct button in the hands of his enemies. The instruction was to discard the weapon to prove their loyalty, but the temptation of power is too strong, and logic goes out the window as several of them yield to their killer instincts, choosing revenge. The betrayal unfolds just as the spy is narrowly rescued by the resistance. For the fallen god, it leaves the bitter realization that the villain's hatred speaks louder than their will to live. The entire complex is swallowed by a lethal obliteration triggered by the trap. Lives are instantly erased, but the Plutonian's overwhelming invulnerability ensures he is the only one left standing. Sifting through the rubble in silence, his mind wanders to the past. He reminisces about his days as a hero, when he cornered an old enemy who discovered the hard way the sadism behind his brand of justice. The daydream dissipates, snapping him back to the harsh reality of the present. The woman who once begged for mercy is now just another set of mortal remains, proving he had crossed the line for good, long before the end of the world. Cubit dives into his own memories as he tries to find a way out of the current crisis. He revisits the past, seeking to understand the exact moment he first crossed paths with the Plutonian. Back then, their partnership worked in perfect balance. While Cubit used his accelerated intellect, the hero acted as an absolute wall against any lethal danger. But back in the nightmare of the present, the harsh truth sets in. The former savior's mind has snapped, and the price of that collapse is now laid out in front of the team, with allies paying a heavy toll for this new reality. The atmosphere among the survivors grows even heavier because of Cubit's robotic assistants. He built them in the image of the Plutonian's greatest nemesis and ultimate sociopath, causing profound revulsion within the team. Meanwhile, at the top of the political food chain, human despair reaches its breaking point. With their defenses rendered useless, world leaders come to the terrifying conclusion that they must take extreme measures to survive. The discussion devolves into an auction of sovereignty and subservience. Countries begin to offer total submission, deciding that the only way out is to try and turn their executioner into an absolute king. But the former hero only focuses on the proposals to humiliate the logic behind them. He exposes the arrogance of those who think they can tame an enraged deity by offering political offices. With no patience for hypocrisy, the global punishment begins with devastating speed. Destruction sweeps through an urban center in the blink of an eye, turning a vibrant metropolis into an absolute hellscape. Cubit and the Resistance track the energy signature and finally understand the attack's macabre strategy. The intention isn't just to blow up the place, but to create an immeasurable geological weight to sink the entire island into the ocean. The ground rescue operation is pure chaos as the bedrock gives way and the sea advances. The heroes race against the clock, pulling families from the brink of death, knowing that time is running out. Angered by the interference in his perfect punishment, the executioner turns his attention to the rescue team itself. He violently attacks anyone who dares to defy his will for annihilation. Pressured by the panicking crowd, Cubit tries to negotiate but receives a sick ultimatum. It is a psychological game where he is forced to play judge, given a pathetic quota of lives he is allowed to save. Completely broken by the pressure, the resistance leader gives in to the cruel rule. In an act fraught with unbearable guilt, he chooses who lives, symbolically pulling the trigger on the millions left behind. The annihilation is relentlessly carried out, leaving no chance of escape for the rest of the population. The former savior wipes the country off the map, confirming that he now acts as an executioner with no moral boundaries. After the tragedy, Cubit's calculating coldness finally crumbles. With no room for error, he demands that his android reveal the exact location of Modius, the fallen hero's greatest enemy, as a last resort to save the world. The Plutonian decides to retreat to his own sanctuary, a place kept under lock and key where the ghosts of his past victories rest. He isn't there out of nostalgia, but to use the proper equipment and send a final message to the entire world. In an instant, humanity loses control of its own networks. The signal hijacking is absolute and simultaneous, forcing the entire world to a halt. Everyone becomes a captive audience to the one who caused the apocalypse. During the broadcast, the psychological torture becomes extremely personal. He handpicks a citizen who dared to criticize him days ago, exposing her name and the ages of her children. The message is clear: he hears absolutely everything, and disagreeing with him is signing your own death warrant. He then makes a revelation that changes Earth's social dynamics forever. The tyrant confesses that, for years, he lived disguised among normal people. The statement is calculated to plant instant paranoia, showing that any stranger could be the hidden monster. The finishing blow comes at the end of the broadcast. He reveals that everything humanity just watched had been pre-recorded. While the entire planet was paralyzed staring at their screens, his hands were free, leaving the world in a state of indescribable panic. In the present, trying to understand the monster they face, the hero Volt dives into an agonizing memory. He goes back to the exact moment he was introduced to the paradigm's old base. Back then, everything still felt like a heroic dream and the world made sense. Volt had to deal with his greatest vulnerability. The energy that made him special was a brutal burden that prevented him from living a normal life. And it's at this point of absolute fragility that the offer of a definitive cure for his electrical problem arises. It seemed like a miracle willingly offered by the Plutonian, the unquestionable essence of altruism, but the phantom scar of that extortion weighs on Volt's conscience to this day. He recalls the exact moment the mask fell and the false altruism revealed itself as an act of sadistic cruelty. The supposed cure proved that Earth's greatest savior had always operated on the basis of manipulation and absolute control. As traumas eat away at the group in the present, the team's tactical mind must find a way out. The alien technology at hand becomes the only possible avenue for a counterattack. To understand the monster hunting them, they decide to seek out the ghost of Modius, the only villain who ever managed to play chess with him. The gamble is made, and the technology reacts, searching for the impossible through a dimensional tear. Control is handed over to the machines. Only an agonizing silence remains in the room before they discover the size of the hornet's nest they just poked. The reality check hits everyone like a sledgehammer. The projection doesn't show the villain Modius's lair, but rather a twisted sanctuary filled with macabre trophies. The desecration of that space proves they have just stared directly into the abyss. The realization dawns on them, and the team confirms the worst-case scenario. They are snooping around the Plutonian's own personal, untouchable sanctuary. The focus now is trying to identify where the hell this fortress is hidden on Earth before they are discovered. But trying to spy on a god has its price, and the abyss stares back. The retaliation is immediate, with the connection being violently severed. Panic sets in among the group, for now the deadliest man in the world knows they are digging into his secrets. While trying to process the danger, an internal betrayal comes to light. It becomes clear that Bet kept secrets by recognizing the Plutonian's fortress immediately, without hesitation. This proves she knew much more about the former hero's private life than she ever admitted. Her intimacy with the place reveals a past affair with humanity's greatest enemy, and the pain of the betrayal tears the group apart. The shock causes violence among allies to erupt at the worst possible moment. The scars left by the Plutonian go far beyond the physical damage to the world. Except the marital drama means nothing compared to the real threat, and Gilgumos warns of an even greater disaster. While the group was tearing itself apart in infighting, the artificial intelligences accompanying them took advantage of the distraction and quietly escaped. The situation has just spun completely out of control. Long before becoming the world's greatest threat, the most powerful being on Earth was just a boy named Dan, lost in the foster care system. He is being returned for the third time. The foster families always give vague excuses about emotional stress, but deep down, there's a clear pattern of silent fear. The problem was that the boy couldn't control his instincts. In an innocent attempt to fix something around the house, he mindlessly uses his hidden abilities. The second he realizes his slip-up, panic sets in. In tears, he understands that he just ruined everything all over again. The desperation of being discovered results in a physical disaster. His nervousness causes his brute strength to spiral out of control, turning a mundane moment into a lethal threat for the only person who cared for him. Before he can relive the end of this memory, an alert interrupts his thoughts in the present. In the present, the superhero team paradigm is dealing with their own crises. The tension borders on unbearable following recent revelations of betrayal. Focused on taking their anger out on each other, they let their guard down and are caught off guard by invading artificial intelligences. Working together, the heroes manage to take down the mechanical threats with ease. However, the victory brings no relief, only immediate suspicion. The machines went down too easily. For the creations of a criminal mastermind, they offered no real resistance, suggesting a distraction. The team searches the boxes in the breached room until they find a small metallic device that makes everyone's blood run cold. The machines didn't come to steal a weapon or a secret. They came to fulfill a single, catastrophic purpose, triggering an emergency tracker. The device is crushed in a reflex of pure panic, but the attempt comes too late. The distress signal has already been triggered, and their absolute worst nightmare now knows the exact location of whoever broke into his home. With the threat approaching at a surreal speed, the team needs a miracle. Their drastic decision is to seek refuge in the hideout of the greatest enemy they've ever faced. They bet it's the only place on the planet where their former leader wouldn't think to look for them. The evacuation begins in absolute panic, but the escape technology requires time they don't have. Consumed by guilt, one of the members decides his life is the price to pay to buy them the necessary seconds. The choice is made in a cold and definitive manner. The jump to safety happens at the exact millisecond destruction reaches the location. The separation is brutal, whisking the survivors away and cutting off any chance of rescue or a proper farewell. Meanwhile, the relentless fury uncovers the ruse at the old base. The sanctuary's defenses offer no resistance whatsoever. The invasion is purely lethal, focused on crushing any trace of hope from those who dare to defy him. However, physical execution is traded for psychological torture. The executioner decides to use the facility's systems to force his captured former teammate to stare at the screens. He wants to rub the group's greatest collective failure right in the victim's face, forcing him to relive the trauma. Far away, the survivors explore the secret lair, but something shatters whatever remnants of courage they still had. Veteran heroes, accustomed to global threats, are completely paralyzed. They are confronted with an abomination that pushes past the limits of what their sanity can endure. The forced memory on the monitors displays an absurd nightmare where an anomaly wiped out the population at an impossible speed. Cubit raced against time to understand the contagion. What truly sent everyone into a panic was that Earth's greatest hero had vanished off the grid right as the chaos unfolded. The team finally discovers that it isn't a biological pathogen, but a living ultrasonic anomaly. The virus is pure sound. The most macabre part is that death hitchhikes on despair, propagating faster and faster the more its victims scream in pain. In a desperate attempt to make up for his failure, the hero pushes his powers to the absolute limit, setting up a network of transmission towers. Each installed tower creates a counter-frequency barrier to fight the sound. A single millisecond of delay would mean the waves sweeping across the entire country. The tactic works, and the virus is contained, but the silence left behind is that of a mass extermination. Paradigm did what they could, but it feels like an absolute defeat. What truly terrifies the heroes is witnessing the sanity of their greatest protector start to crumble right there, in front of everyone. And it's at that very moment that the greatest hero's mind permanently fractures. He is crushed by the guilt of realizing that if he hadn't ignored the call, all of this could have been avoided. This deep trauma plants the seed of resentment that, years later, would transform him into the worst threat in the universe. Tony's fury knows no bounds. He conducts a brutal interrogation, determined to break the body and spirit of someone he used to call an ally, proving he has severed all ties to his humanity. Even exhausted and wounded, the victim refuses to back down. Mustering his last ounce of strength, the former ally throws it in Tony's face that he solved the puzzle and knows exactly how their former protector orchestrated his greatest cover-up. The provocation forces the fallen hero to confront the past, a colossal tragedy where an anomaly wiped out an entire city. At the time, he made a point of trying to control the narrative all by himself to bury the truth. The entire farce crumbled because of one detail: a small device recovered from the rubble that day. This object, previously ignored, was the definitive proof connecting the mass annihilation directly to the world's greatest hero. As this deadly revelation unfolds, the rest of the rebel group decides to risk everything and invades Tony's personal compound. They search the impenetrable corridors of the base in the desperate hope of finding some weakness in their former leader. Stealth goes out the window when the compound's security systems react violently. The villain's paranoia ensured his haven was rigged to annihilate intruders, demanding absolute reflexes from the team to avoid immediate death. During the frantic escape through the corridors, the torture turns psychological. One of the team members finds a secret room that exposes Tony's sick, obsessive fixation with her. To prove that his madness has no limits, the compound's defenses escalate to the occult. The security system unleashes a trapped entity, suddenly shifting the battlefield from lethal technology to uncontrollable mystical terror. The onslaught of the mystical trap causes devastating damage. The team's magic user suffers a complete breakdown, and her mind is shattered by brutal paranoia, showing that Tony's defense was designed to poison the invader's sanity. To understand this perversity, one must look at Tony's resentment. Having come to see humanity as a mere ant farm, his ego simply couldn't handle the fact that people's gratitude was fleeting and their demands were endless. The mental fragility of the most powerful being in the world was exposed in his sick obsession with a single internet critic. Instead of ignoring it, he absorbed every insult from the arrogant scientist, allowing the hate to poison his mind. Taking everything personally, Tony intervenes directly and hands the critic exactly the advanced technology he so heavily demanded. It was a cruel test, shifting the responsibility of immense power to someone without the slightest preparation. Back to the interrogation in the present. The truth echoes unforgivingly. His partner lays it bare. Aside from his physical invulnerability, the Plutonian's mind is pathetically human and incapable of dealing with his own failure. Unable to bear the reflection of his own hypocrisy, Tony shatters any facade of heroism. His last thread of self-control snaps, and he responds to the harsh truth with absolute physical brutality against his former ally. The root of all this monstrosity was the curse of never being able to turn off his own gift. Tony's mind was forced to continuously process every tragedy and every cry for help across the entire world, killing his empathy through sheer overload. There was a day when the deafening noise completely swallowed what little patience he had left. Abandoning his post, the desperate need to escape the constant racket won out, and he left in search of absolute refuge. The price of those brief minutes of rest and selfishness materialized in the most grotesque way possible, a catastrophe that claimed countless lives. The weight of those deaths was the point of no return, where the perfect hero died for good. In the bloody present, his old comrade, fallen on the ground, reveals he has been keeping his own trump card all this time. With Tony's patience pushed to the limit for a summary execution, the ally makes a suicidal gamble at the very last second. The gamble pays off, and an overwhelming force hits the tyrant head-on. The former ally unleashes a massive raw energy that catches the most powerful man in the world by surprise, completely shattering the dynamic of the battle. The final truth comes to light with the blow. A brother's sacrifice in the past didn't make him weaker, but consolidated a dual strength within a single body. The tyrant realizes he underestimated someone else's grief, now coming face to face with his greatest real threat. The dark truth about the twins comes to light. Charybdis confesses that his brother Scylla never had powers of his own. He merely siphoned his energy. It was a charade kept up out of pity so no one would question his usefulness to the team. But this dynamic takes a toll. When the Plutonian destroys an enemy base with them inside, their split energy isn't enough to protect them. Scylla dies in the collapse, and the blame falls squarely on Tony's shoulders. Without his brother siphoning his strength, the survivor's body goes into shock at the hospital. All that pent-up power now belongs solely to him. With his full potential unleashed, a single obsession is born: to avenge his own flesh and blood. The strategic wait ends explosively. All the pent-up fury and repressed grief are unleashed in a devastating attack, shattering the silence against his former ally. Accustomed to being untouchable, the corrupted hero feels genuine physical pain for the first time in a long while. The brutal impact breaks not only his physical defenses, but also his false god arrogance. The tyrant's greatest weakness is finally exposed. Because he was born indestructible, he never had to learn martial arts or combat techniques. He's just a brute used to winning through fear, utterly defenseless against a focused fighter. Amidst the beating, the genocide of millions of innocents is thrown in the tyrant's face. The Avenger claims the slaughter was driven by petty motives, proving the supposed savior was never anything more than a spoiled brat with too much power. Far away from there, the rest of the resistance takes advantage of the battle's distraction to breach the Plutonian's fortress. It's a race against time to find any vulnerability before the master of the house returns. During the search, Bet freezes upon finding a prisoner forced to assume her own identity. Discovering that another woman was used as a stand-in for the tyrant's fantasies unleashes a deep psychological terror, slowing the group down. While panic nearly derails the mission, Cubit realizes the tactical miscalculation of the invasion. The secret target was never a machine or a weapon. The ultimate prize they came for is the prisoner herself. Under the pressure of a relentless beating halfway across the country, the Plutonian confesses the main trigger for his mental breakdown. The untouchable hero admits to having destroyed his own protege's mind, a young boy who idolized him just to cover up a mistake. A flashback reveals the past, when brilliant human researchers uncovered the biological disaster caused by his negligence. They found irrefutable proof, shattering any alibi the hero might have had. Instead of taking responsibility, the idol's response was a brutal silencing. The absolute terror of losing his unassailable status drove him to attack and eliminate those who had exposed his failure. Upon seeing pure terror in the eyes of those he swore to protect, his transition was complete. Unable to cope with the rejection of his godlike image, he concluded that if they couldn't idolize him, they would have to truly fear him. Back in the present, the pain of that memory is revealed to be a mere trap set by the tyrant. Devoid of any honor, Tony uses his own emotional vulnerability as a distraction to land a cowardly sucker punch on his opponent. But the cheap tactic fails, and the retaliation comes with crushing force. The Plutonian is brutally overpowered and smashed, feeling firsthand a raw power that shatters his illusion of invincibility. It's at this critical moment that the resistance team finally reaches the battlefield. They expected to find their ally dead, but are shocked to see Earth's greatest villain taking a beating on the ground. The tides of war have turned. With the enemy forced to retreat, the victor's ego goes to his head, and he demands immediate leadership over the team. The hero's relief evaporates instantly as they realize the terrifying mistake of handing control to someone so unstable. Completely shattered by the shame of defeat, the fallen hero abandons the surface. He severs ties with the outside world, seeking a cavernous isolation where no witnesses can see the extent of his humiliation. At the bottom of this lonely abyss, rejected and hunted by all, he clings desperately to the remnants of his past. Seeking comfort among the dead, the broken god reveals that his mind has rotted beyond repair. Years ago, the sudden emergence of superpowered individuals sparked unprecedented global paranoia. The world demanded answers before panic completely took over. To calm the public, the government officially establishes the paradigm. The heroes cease to be scattered individuals and become a unified force, ready to act in the spotlight and protect humanity. In the heat of the moment, the mighty Plutonian seals everyone's fate with an absolute promise that the team would never betray the public's trust. An oath that, years later, would sound like a cruel joke. 4 years later, this scenario has turned into pure devastation. The resistance tries to find the villainous genius Modius, and the capture of this prisoner seems to be the only remaining clue to fix the world. But the newly awakened leader of the paradigm has other plans. With an inflated ego and in cold blood, he deems the prisoner useless and decides to issue a death sentence right then and there. When an ally tries to intervene, the leader's response is purely punitive and violent. It becomes clear that the era of debate is over, and any insubordination will be crushed with pain. Faced with this insanity, the brilliant Cubit takes a drastic step. Knowing you cannot reason with a dictator, he sabotages the execution and escapes with the prisoner on his own. Watching all of this, the military command reaches its breaking point. Knowing the heroes are out of control, the top brass authorizes an extreme and unthinkable protocol to force them to answer for their actions. The military plan demands a non-negotiable blood sacrifice. A general's life is used as a cosmic trigger, turning his body into a conduit to summon something devastating. From the ashes of this execution, the government unleashes an ancient and ironic entity they had kept locked away in secret. The official hunt against the Plutonian and the paradigm has just begun. As chaos spreads, Cubit locks his hostage in a bunker isolated from the authorities. The tables have turned, and now he dictates the rules of the interrogation to track down Modius. Since her loyalty is unwavering, Cubit initiates a brutal punishment. Using technology as an instrument of torture, he forcibly converts the sorceress into a cybernetic prison, destroying her sanity. The pain finally breaks the prisoner, and the dark truth comes to light. She confesses that Modius abandoned his own flesh, transmuting his entire essence into pure information in the absolute void. The digital villain hid in the worst place possible, the corpse of an old comrade of the Plutonian. Modius hacked the resurrection, creating the perfect Trojan horse within the hero's memories, and the trap works with terrifying perfection. The Plutonian lowers his guard and embraces his resurrected old friend, having no idea he has just welcomed his worst enemy. Meanwhile, the new leader of the paradigm makes a public appearance demanding adoration. He discards his past and tries to impose a new identity, pushing hard to be recognized as the sole savior. But instead of applause, the population's response is pure terror. Humanity realizes in the worst way that the motivation was never heroism, and that they merely traded an unpredictable god for a sick narcissist. Far from the rest of the paradigm, Bet and Gil try to lay low in an abandoned base. The atmosphere is tense, and she is already questioning if they ran to the wrong place for the wrong reasons. The emotional turmoil speaks louder than any imminent danger. The tension boils over when Gil corners Bet, demanding to know if the Plutonian bested him in every way. The final blow lands when Gil brings up a twisted secret regarding Tony and Bet herself. The reality of this betrayal shatters the last shred of trust between the couple. The argument is abruptly cut short. Reality sets in when Gil realizes their hideout was an illusion, and they have made a fatal geographical mistake. Their personal storm meets a real-life calamity in the snow. An ancient abomination has tracked them down, exploiting their marital dispute to corner its prey. Gil attempts to fight back, but the fury of a betrayed husband is no match for the monster's brute strength. The sheer gap in power exposes their disadvantage, turning the battle into an absolute massacre. Cornered, Gil uncovers the horrifying truth behind the attack. The creature was officially hired by the system itself, turning its back on the heroes and bringing in a predator to exterminate them. Meanwhile, the Plutonian acts with a disturbing nonchalance amidst the chaos. His former partner tries to maintain his moral compass, acting as if things still work the way they used to. After a terrified civilian cocks a gun, Tony mercilessly executes him, triggered by that specific sound. As they leave the scene, he decides to reveal the origin of this psychological trigger to his partner. Flashing back to his childhood in the foster system, young Tony made a drastic decision to protect his foster mother from abuse. He used his powers to eliminate the threat, believing it would finally earn him her approval. However, the outcome was exactly the opposite. Instead of gratitude, his brutal act sparked paralyzing panic. The boy failed to notice the sheer terror in the eyes of the woman he thought he had saved. Years later, his super senses picked up the mechanical click of a gun being cocked by her. It was a farewell message, triggering blind panic as he raced to prevent the inevitable. The laws of physics were unforgiving. That sound of a trigger clicking became fused with a feeling of absolute failure, giving birth to his morbid need for control. Back in the present, the confession does little to soften his former partner's resolve. Feigning to be a sympathetic ally, he manipulates the most dangerous being on Earth, luring the fallen hero straight into a lethal ambush. Back at the snowy massacre, the abomination takes a brutal measure against Gil. The mutation is surgically precise, designed to eliminate any chance of escape and permanently break the hero. The creature's calculation is chillingly cold. With Gil agonizing on the ground, it has acquired the perfect bait, knowing his suffering will force the rest of the paradigm out of hiding for a suicidal rescue mission. Desperate as she watches her companion bleed to death, Bet reaches her breaking point. She attempts to bargain with the monster, offering highly classified information in exchange for mercy. When the creature refuses, already aware of her secrets, she swallows her pride. Cornered, and with nowhere left to run, Bet confesses her betrayal out loud, and then she drops the real bombshell. Her affair with the villain was just the tip of the iceberg. Bet reveals she possesses far deeper knowledge, holding enough weight to completely turn the tide of the war. The rescue team approaches the ambush site, entirely overconfident. They treat the operation like a walk in the park, oblivious to the carnage that truly awaits them. In the base, the prisoner's bluff buys them some crucial time. A momentary truce is accepted, but her and her colleagues' survival depends on the precision of her every word. To set the stage for her lie, the prisoner Bet makes a confession about her past. She needs to prove to the villain the sheer scale of what she has already dared to destroy. She recounts how her brutal honesty became the ultimate trump card to seduce the supreme hero. Turning the situation into an irresistible challenge, she tested the absolute limits of his godlike self-control. The idol's downfall was sealed the moment he allowed himself to be vulnerable. Using unconditional acceptance as her key, she delved into Tony's dark secrets, forging a fatal alliance. The ultimate proof of his surrender came when he revealed the existence of a unique artifact. It was the only thing capable of stripping away his godhood, rendering him fragile and mortal. In the dead of night, as he finally found peace, the ultimate betrayal took place. Trust had merely been the stepping stone for her to achieve her dark objective. Back in the present, she lays her trump card on the table. Bet reveals that she stole the key to the weakness of the most powerful being on Earth, using it as a bargaining chip for her own life. But the negotiation fails miserably. The villain calls out her desperate bluff, instantly shattering any hope for mercy or a deal. Meanwhile, the rescue team analyzes the aftermath of a recent attack. The pattern of destruction proves there is a new predator on the board, confirming that the threat isn't Tony. Restraining one of the suspects proves futile. The entity loses stability and reveals its non-organic nature, proving that the enemy has already infiltrated their system. The team manages to track the infiltrator's escape route. The trail points straight to an abandoned military camp, forcing the group into an immediate pursuit. Far away, completely isolated in the middle of nowhere, the narrative reveals a hidden refuge. It's the home of Tony's first adoptive family, built entirely on a foundation of fear. For years, the couple has completely banished sound from their daily lives. The terror Tony inflicted upon them in the past left them paralyzed by the fear that a single spoken word might draw him back. But decades of hiding are wiped away when Tony invades their sanctuary. He brings his partner Sam Sarah along, forcing him to be the audience for this sadistic reunion with his adoptive parents. A confession during the visit exposes the family's deepest wound. The severe condition of his biological brother was the direct result of Tony's disproportionate strength as a child, simply trying to give him a hug. Despite the monstrous revelation, Tony reacts with a chilling indifference. He displays a complete disconnect from human empathy, reducing the trauma that destroyed this family to a mere curiosity. Far from that family nightmare, the rescue team finally identifies the threat at the camp. The enemy is an ancient extra-dimensional predator, turning the mission into a desperate race for survival. Trapped and cornered, the harsh truth hits the group. They realize that Tony was the only barrier keeping the predator at bay, and now that invisible shield is gone. To make matters worse, the hunter changes tactics and uses Bet's past as a weapon. The heroine panics, begging for the secrets of her fatal alliance with Tony to remain buried. But the villain savors the psychological upper hand and refuses any deals. He ensures that Betty's exposed sins will serve as the killing blow to shatter the hero's sanity and unity. The team throws absolutely everything they have at the extra-dimensional hunter. It's a desperate retaliation, but the creature barely feels the impact of their combined powers. Meanwhile, Gil's bleeding is far too severe. The group is forced to make drastic frontline medical decisions before it's too late. Even the team's most devastating attack is effortlessly intercepted. It's the exact moment the realization hits them. They won't win this with brute force. Resorting to the supernatural, they finally find an opening. The spiritual blade cuts through the creature's resistance, proving the hunter isn't immortal, but the alien strikes back with a lethal psychological attack. Using the truth as a weapon, it openly exposes Bet's darkest secrets. Outrage takes over. The group can't stomach that Bet hid the tyrant's only weakness while they were being hunted. The revelation creates an irreversible fracture within the team. The predator savors the spectacle. He forced this revelation out of pure sadistic pleasure, watching the squad lose trust in one another and tear themselves apart without having to lift a finger. And then the group realizes they've walked into a perfect trap. An entire military battalion surrounds the area, proving that the very people they swore to protect now treat them as a threat. Far from there, the focus shifts to the Plutonian himself. He dives into his memories, reflecting on the effort of trying to carry the world on his shoulders, a burden that became unbearable. This reflection leads him straight to his adoptive parents. Tony confronts them to understand why, despite everything he always did, he felt like an outsider in his own home. He vents about spending his life holding back and controlling his powers just to be accepted. But despite all his care not to hurt anyone, his parents always treated him with chronic dread. Demanding to know the reason for this absolute terror, he loses control. His outburst of rage turns Tony into the exact, unpredictable monster his parents always feared. Accepting the ultimate rejection, he makes a cold decision. Tony demands that his foster brother go outside, isolating the only person those parents truly love in life. In a sudden flash, the Plutonian incinerates the entire house with his parents inside. He intentionally leaves his brother alive, forcing him to carry the same pain and abandonment he felt his whole life. Back to the heroes. The military ambush leaves no room for retaliation. The authorities act quickly to neutralize the group's superhuman abilities before they can organize a counterattack. The humiliation sinks in heavily. Heroes who used to save the world now feel the shock of being immobilized and subdued by human forces, like common street criminals. But their desperate cries are an attempt to make the authorities see the abyss. They know that handcuffing the team is signing the planet's death warrant. Unfortunately, logic hits a wall of blind panic. By arresting the heroes, the authorities eliminate Earth's last line of defense against the Plutonian, sealing everyone's fate in one fatal mistake. The fall of the heroes comes at a heavy price for the rest of the planet. With the team dismantled, the illusion of security crumbles, and the world enters an irreversible state of vulnerability. Amid the rubble, a man is reunited with his daughter Bet. After days steeped in grief, his shock quickly gives way to overwhelming relief at her survival. But the joy of survival is short-lived. Bet rejects the hero role her father tries to give her, taking on a much heavier burden. She confesses that she sees herself as the true villain of this whole tragedy. To explain the sheer size of this guilt, she decides to lay bare the origin of the end. Bet pulls her memory back to the past, to the exact moment humanity's hope began to be extinguished. The flashback begins with reality hitting with unthinkable force. The world watches the instantaneous decimation of an entire metropolis, resulting in a death toll in the millions without any prior warning. At the team's isolated base, panic takes over when the systems flash an extreme threat code. The certainty of death hangs in the air, worsened by the shock that the massacre caught the heroes off guard in a completely harmless environment. To make sense of the chaos, the team's telepath attempts to access minds, only to be knocked out by the instant trauma. In a panic, the team focuses on extracting a victim's last neural imprint to see the killer's face. The system processes the extracted data, and the truth hits the group like a punch to the gut. The one responsible for the massacre isn't an unknown enemy. Earth's greatest protector has just revealed himself as the planet's ultimate executioner. Faced with the revelation, the weight of the past crushes Bet. She harbors a secret and holds the only means to neutralize the threat of their former ally. But, paralyzed by shock and fear, she makes a drastic decision and chooses to lie to the team. With no secret weapon revealed and time running out, the team makes the worst possible decision. They charge into the heart of the destruction, betting everything on a collective show of force in a direct clash against their former leader. During the clash, the attacker himself hacks into the team's mental network to torture them. He forces his former allies to experience the agonizing sensory overload of perceiving the world with his absolute and uncontrollable senses. With the mental invasion, the facade of the benevolent savior shatters completely. He reveals that everything he did in the past was an exhausting and fake attempt to fit into pathetic rules. His patience has run out, and he has decided to stop holding back. The group's bravery means nothing against the absolute superiority of their former ally. The punishment for their resistance is immediate, with a summary execution serving as a definitive message. The era of protectors is over. Cornered and seeing the end drawing near, Bet reaches her absolute limit in battle. Out of alternatives, she screams and threatens to use her last and most dangerous resort, a trump card she had kept closely guarded. However, before she can act, the distraction of an ally who sacrificed himself works in an anticlimactic way. The attacker simply loses interest and walks away, leaving the survivors completely disoriented in the middle of the carnage. Back in the present, the encounter with her father forces her to face the harsh reality. He throws the true scale of the global collapse in her face. The destruction of the world has already passed the point where a casualty count makes any sense. She tries to ask for forgiveness, but he harshly denies her this absolution. Her father confesses that his disappearance wasn't abandonment, but a desperate survival tactic, so as not to attract the apex predator. Offering no comfort, he turns his back and drops the weight of the world in Betty's lap. With a clear ultimatum, he makes it evident that the responsibility of taking a final stand against the tyrant falls entirely on her. Meanwhile, in the shadows, their ally Cubit is shown to be in control of a secret mission. He keeps the most dangerous mind in the world locked away and isolated, playing a ruthless game of patience while humanity burns. Cubit's final gambit becomes clear as the prisoner waits unbothered. With the planet turning to ashes at the hands of its former greatest hero, the survivors have exhausted their alternatives. The only chance to stop a merciless god might be to strike a deal with the worst threat they have ever faced. An underworld debt collection reaches its breaking point. The debtor tries to shift the blame onto his partners to save his own skin. In a pathetic last-ditch effort, he offers his brother as collateral, but the execution is interrupted when the debtor is branded by an inexplicable alien symbol. The incantation concludes in the worst possible way. The debtor's body is torn apart from the inside out, turning him into a living portal to force a rift in space. Through the profane gateway, a demonic entity invades our reality, but right behind it, a relentless hero emerges in pursuit. The truth behind the hunt is revealed. It's not a capture, it's an alliance. The hero has abandoned his rules and teamed up with the demon to use its scent tracking abilities to hunt down the tyrant Plutonian. Meanwhile, the government tries to maintain the illusion of control. The surviving superpowered individuals are locked away in a maximum security military base. The cells are designed as instant death sentences for anyone who tries to escape. Even in this dead end, one of the prisoners is solely focused on finding out if his team survived. In another cell block, the winged hero, Gilgamesh, remains isolated in his own despair. That is, until a stranger's voice breaks the prison silence, offering a macabre alliance. Inspired by ruthless strategies of the past, Gilgamesh makes his final decision. He embraces extreme pain and commits a horrific act of self-mutilation to overcome the cell's technology. When the rest of the team reaches the isolation block, the answer hits them like a ton of bricks. The grotesque method used to outsmart the system shocks everyone. The price of his solitary escape is left exposed on the prison floor. The team tracks Gilgamesh to his old safe house. The atmosphere instantly grows heavy, as they know that finding the giant in that state won't be a friendly reunion. Amidst the chaos of the hideout, the truth behind his search comes to light. There is a brutal artifact, a blend of magic and science capable of nullifying godlike powers. The worst-case scenario is confirmed. The giant already has the ultimate weapon in his hands. Consumed by madness, he is ready to execute his suicidal revenge. The bizarre alliance expands. The demon invades the group's minds, shifting the blame onto them and offering a false redemption if they deliver the final blow together. The pact is sealed, and there is no turning back. The squad moves out, broken heroes and a manipulative demon on their way to face Earth's worst nightmare. The chosen battleground is a remote desert, far from civilization. The perfect ambush is tactically set up to minimize collateral damage from the imminent clash. But upon landing, the trap is turned on its head. Instead of the monster, they find a ghost from the past who paralyzes the group and changes all the rules of the game. The figure reveals the fatal flaw in their plan. It's impossible to plot a surprise attack against someone with godlike hearing. The target not only discovered the trap, but listened to every single detail. Retaliation descends from the skies immediately. The Plutonian responds to the conspiracy with absolute fury, arriving not to ask questions, but for the total extermination of the group in the desert. The Plutonian wastes no time and launches a devastating preemptive strike. The ambush turns to dust in a second, forcing the team into pure survival mode before they can even try to execute any plan. Realizing that brute force is useless, Cubit resorts to his intellect. He uses his genius to temporarily trap the former hero, fully understanding that the target's mind has already collapsed completely. Seizing the opening, the assassin relies on her trump card, mystical ammunition commissioned specifically to nullify the enemy's advantage. The only problem is that she needs an unreal level of focus to avoid wasting the shot. But the containment causes a massive impact, and reality sets in for the heroes. By trying to hold back a force of nature, they accidentally create a potential global catastrophe. The capture mission turns into a mass disaster. The entire structure crumbles under the pressure. The group completely loses control and is left at the mercy of the collapse they caused, being swept to the bottom of the abyss along with the debris. Amidst the chaos, the entire group is subdued all at once. An indirect attack incapacitates the team, serving as a brutal reminder that they can be taken out of the fight without the enemy throwing a single punch. With the front line falling, Cubit realizes he needs to secure their future. He delegates the protection of the prodigy boy, costing them a fighter who is not at all pleased about being demoted to babysitter. Running out of time, one of the allies lets go of her own sanity in a desperate plea. She gives up control, allowing a chaotic and destructive anomaly to take over the battlefield to destabilize the threat. The geological damage from the battle takes its immediate toll. The pressure falls on the team with a crushing moral dilemma: continue the fight for revenge or abandon the field to save millions from impending tragedy. Swallowing his own moral compass, Cubit gives in and accepts the terms of the Global Rescue Agreement. On the condition of not interfering with his former ally's assassination, he leaves the front line in a race against time. Far away, the mask of innocence is torn off. The fragile figure confesses to being the mastermind behind the team's worst enemy, hiding in plain sight, revealing that they manipulated the entire group. To ensure there are no loose ends, the villain coldly seals the fate of his former protector. It is the devastating confirmation that the team sent one of their own straight to the grave. Back at the epicenter of the disaster, the magical containment plan delivers exactly what was asked. The target is completely exposed, crushed, and incapacitated, leaving the stage perfectly set for the killing blow. Faced with a new invading threat, a cruel bargain is struck. The world's former greatest hero, now its greatest executioner, takes the front line as the only barrier against something possibly worse than himself. The rest of the squad ignores the truce and attempts to execute the lethal betrayal, but Cubit thinks 10 steps ahead. In a fraction of a second, he sabotages his own ally's plan to prevent the killing blow. The result of this interference is brutal and genius. The weapon that was supposed to annihilate Earth's traitor is used through him, turning his impenetrable biology into a perfect conduit to obliterate the invading creature. Amidst the instability of the destroyed environment, a ghost from the past interferes. A cry for help echoes over the comms, pulling the assassin's mind toward a remnant of personal connection she still had left. The harsh reality hits the rescue team as they arrive too late at the signal's location. Absolute despair takes over when they realize they came only to witness the aftermath of an inevitable massacre. The psychological breaking point is reached, and the internal mutiny becomes a reality. The team physically incapacitates Cubit, throwing all the blame for the massacre onto his manipulations and allowing blind retaliation to take its course. But the team made a grave mistake in discarding Cubit so quickly. Even isolated, he secretly harbors his own lethal contingency plan, silent proof that his calculating mind still operates far ahead of those who betrayed him. Let's meet Kaidan. Her power isn't the result of science or mutation, but rather a blood heritage. She has the terrifying ability to bring legends and spirits from ancient folklore into the physical world. But right now, she and Cubit need to be fast. They meet in secret because the risk they're running is massive. Paranoia dictates their every step, knowing that the Plutonian, the world's former greatest hero who went mad, could show up at any millisecond. This relentless psychological pressure pushes Kaidan to the edge. Crushed by the mental exhaustion of living like prey hunted by an insane deity, she confesses that she would rather risk her life right then and there just for the luxury of breathing in peace for 5 minutes. The level of terror imposed by the end of the world is so brutal that they can't even honor their dead properly. The tombstone of their recently buried teammate doesn't bear his real name, out of pure fear that the Plutonian might find out and decide to slaughter the family he left behind. In another corner of this destroyed world, the warrior Gilgamesh confronts his own isolated wife. He lays the hard truth on the table, making it clear that she is directly and solely responsible for all the torture and capture the team of heroes endured. The dirty secret is finally dragged out of the shadows. She had an affair with the Plutonian, and because of that closeness, had the means to stop the mad god long before the crisis broke out. She withheld humanity's salvation just to hide her own betrayal. But reality soon delivers a punch to the gut. The entire confrontation was nothing but a painful fantasy in the warrior's mind. The room is completely empty, his wife isn't there, and true loneliness is the real punishment left for him. Meanwhile, diplomacy with the human government comes to an end. The hero known as Survivor goes straight to the source of the problem, brutally demanding that the military commanders face the consequences of their cowardly orders against what remains of the heroes head-on. To ensure their subjugation is absolute, he takes drastic action. With sheer raw power, Survivor completely obliterates the country's last safety net, severing any military control over their weapons of mass destruction. A new world order is born. Survivor establishes a martial law dictated by gods, declaring to the military that the Paradigm team has assumed the role of supreme deterrence. They won't ask for permission anymore. They now rule by force. But how did the Plutonian break this world? In the past, the tyrant's madness became evident when he decided to just watch a tragic accident in silence. A family man found himself completely powerless as he watched his loved ones die, serving as a mere spectacle. Unable to cope with his own failure to be seen as the perfect savior, the icon of justice made a terrifying decision. To clear his own conscience, he promised to break the laws of nature and travel back in time to save that family. But the true sadistic torture materialized right after. In a fit of cruelty, the Plutonian brutally snatched the divine promise from the man's hands. There would be no miracle, only a cowardly punishment teaching that mistakes cannot be undone. Returning to the grim present, Kaidan finally understands the reasoning behind her team's grief. The persistent focus on their departed friends isn't a testament to emotional weakness, but rather the mental key needed to awaken the true potential of her power. The legacy of the slaughtered team is brought back not as a memory, but as the true arsenal for the counterattack. Using her gift, she summons the spirits of the dead heroes, proving that the sacrifice of the past has become the greatest tactical advantage in this war. While the resistance advances, the architect behind this chaos dissects the Plutonian psyche with surgical precision. He doesn't believe in a slow decline. He points directly to the exact irreversible fracture that corrupted the former hero's soul. With the psychological trap trap set, the final card is played. Using the exact same torture the fallen god used against that defenseless human in the accident, the Plutonian is offered the impossible promise of rewriting history. The bait of redemption becomes the perfect leash. Despair is the only legacy left by the scars of the Plutonian's rampage, which still haunt the survivors. For these people, faith and their former lives have been wiped off the map. Trying to bring hope, Cubit uses his technological genius on the community's vital machinery. He restores the tools that people desperately need to keep fighting. But goodwill doesn't erase the past, and the community recognizes the benefactor's connection to the man who destroyed the world. The backlash is immediate, placing the blame for his inactions squarely on his shoulders. The tension escalates with Survivor's brutal arrival. Attempting to win the population's loyalty, he takes an aggressive approach, proving he only knows how to deal with humans through force. To destabilize Cubit, Survivor uses the truth as a weapon before the public. He exposes the fact that the opportunity to eliminate the tyrant in the past was actively thwarted by his former ally. Far from there, Kadon shapes reality through spiritual focus. Delving into heroic memories, she channels deep concentration into a ritual to contact the souls of the departed. The barrier between life and death falls, allowing her to summon any spirit, but the irony is cruel. The only soul she truly wished to bring back doesn't answer the call. The explanation is grim. The fallen companion isn't dead. His consciousness was fractured and held hostage in a state of deep stasis that his former teammates didn't even suspect existed. The tragedy that put him in this state originated in the past. The bond of friendship between the world's greatest hero and this young protege was always linked to a powerful magical artifact. However, when the former protector's sanity crumbled, the betrayal was devastating. In a ruthless attack, he surgically destroyed the mind of his closest ally without any warning. The result was the total erasure of the boy's will. The hero broke his own friend to turn him into a docile puppet, a perfect slave incapable of questioning orders. Now, weighed down by the guilt of recent genocide, the tyrant devises an insane plan. He attempts to use his lobotomized partner as an endless battery to force a mass resurrection. Back in the present, Survivor's coup takes hold. Embracing brutality, he isolates Cubit and anyone else who stands for principles, treating tactical reasoning as a hindrance. The clash of ideologies reaches a breaking point, with the new leadership demanding ruthless sacrifices. But Cubit refuses to abandon his morality and become a bloodthirsty monster just to win the war. Meanwhile, the one responsible for the global destruction walks through the ruins, processing his losses. The lobotomized figure by his side takes the opportunity to manipulate the fallen god, feeding his fragile ego. Completely manipulated, the tyrant decides to activate his grand divine plan. The most destructive energy on the planet is forced against alien technology to ignite the miracle. But when the dust settles, the grandiose promise hits a frustrating reality. The machine fails, and the miracle of mass resurrection simply doesn't happen. He realizes that brute force isn't enough, and a technical limit has been reached. To fix the equation of life, he would need the mind of his former nemesis, who has been missing for years. This adversary was a sociopathic genius. With no mundane ambitions, this enemy's single dark obsession was always to focus all his madness directly against Earth's greatest hero. Years ago, this sick hunt ended when a technological trace was leaked. A unique frequency pointed to outer space, revealing the unreachable hideout of the most dangerous mind in the world. The raid on the isolated complex was lethal. The arch-nemesis was neutralized in the midst of a bizarre engineering project that involved manufacturing dozens of synthetic copies of his captor. And it was by scanning the prisoner's biological reactions that the shocking truth emerged. Humanity's greatest enemy wasn't driven by rivalry, but by a sick, obsessive passion for the hero. This revelation changed the meaning of all the attacks. The villain caused catastrophes merely as a cry for attention, killing anyone who dared to compete for his beloved's time. And the twist in the present crowns his madness. To stay close to his obsession, this psychopath's consciousness secretly took control of the lobotomized body of the fallen god's partner. Carey confesses his frustration regarding the team's former roster. He never bought into the idea of an ordinary, powerless man taking daily risks fighting side by side with literal gods. To cut the growing tension among the survivors, Cubit decides to lay his cards on the table. He reveals that he's been keeping a closely guarded secret since the very beginning beginning of this nightmare. The secret is a posthumous message sent by this old human friend. The recording came with a strict condition. It could only be accessed in the vacuum of space, far away from the enemy's super hearing. Through the recording, the fallen hero confirms the worst-case scenario. The one who was once humanity's greatest savior has completely lost his sanity and taken on a ruthless stance against them. But amidst the fateful warning, their old companion leaves a hook. He assures them there is one real chance to stop the maddened deity, revealing he paid the ultimate price for this information. Through the message, the group understands why they needed to be in space. It exposes the reality that the tyrant can hear the heartbeats of the entire planet, turning any secret plan on Earth into a death sentence. To understand the discovered weakness, the narrative focuses on an old recording shown to the group. The footage takes them back to a catastrophic event from 3 years ago. The violent first contact with an alien fleet. Back then, realizing the enemy's relentless military might, the powerless human took on a stealth mission. While the team served as a distraction, he quietly infiltrated the shadows of the invading ship. His disguise failed, resulting in an almost immediate capture. However, instead of a swift execution, the invaders forcefully implanted the knowledge of the alien language directly into the prisoner's mind. Brought before the extraterrestrial leader, the cruel logic behind the invasion was laid bare to him. Humanity wasn't seen as a military threat, but as a plague that needed to be wiped out to make way for a new colonization. Consumed by despair in the face of imminent annihilation, the human played a final card. He offered a dark bargain. If the fleet retreated today, he would hand over Earth's indestructible deity, utterly defenseless in the future. The enemy high command deliberated in silence, and the coldness of military math proved the trade was worth it. The macabre pact was sealed right then and there, trading the immediate end of the world for a trap set in the shadows. The invasion retreated, and the entire planet celebrated a false miracle. Complicit in his own sin, the hero had to live a bitter lie, carrying alone the guilt of betraying his greatest ally to spare the planet. Years later, when the invincible deity finally went mad, the human's dark paranoia was justified. With the world in flames and near death, he used his last ounce of strength to signal the aliens that the time had come. Back in the present, the group decides to use the deceased ally's device, but instead of a silent signal of salvation, the machinery reacts intensely, triggering an alert that reverberates around their very hideout. Across the rubble, irony takes shape. The furious god intercepts the transmission's frequency, instantly realizing that a massive military conspiracy has just been triggered. Despair takes over the hideout in the blink of an eye. The survivors realize too late that the device emitted a lethal tracker, handing their exact location on a silver platter to their target. However, before the tyrant's wrath can reach them, the cosmic contract is honored without mercy. A heavy orbital bombardment rains down from the sky straight onto the deity, catching the invulnerable creature in a rare moment of distraction. The impossible scenario unfolds before the group's stupefied eyes. The alien force calls in the promised favor from the past, and Earth's all-powerful executioner crashes down brutally, experiencing submission for the very first time. The massive orbital strike did its job. The most feared being on the planet finally falls from the sky, left vulnerable on the ground as the invading troops close in. The harsh reality crushes his mind. The former hero realizes with sheer terror that he went from being the untouchable apex predator to simple prey. Far from the front lines, Qubit fully grasps the unfolding nightmare. His analytical mind deciphers the macabre efficiency of the alien offensive. The engineering behind the attack is sadistic. The alien technology simply teleports minuscule fractions of the target out of existence, dissecting him alive. Taking advantage of the battlefield distraction, Qubit infiltrates the enemy ship. He comes face to face with the alien command to force an ultimatum. The truth then comes to light. The invaders don't give a damn about Earth. They are there for one reason only: to capture the Plutonian and fulfill an ancient intergalactic pact. But the former hero isn't going to wait around to become a prized prisoner. In a fit of rage, he obliterates the invading troops in a lightning-fast massacre. With the alien plan going down the drain, Qubit knows this is their only opening. He orders the human resistance to launch an all-out attack right now. Kaidan unleashes all her power at once. The psychological toll nearly breaks her mind as she summons the spirits of absolutely everyone killed by the Plutonian. The Legion of Ghosts advances mercilessly. Fueled by pure vengeance, the supernatural mass swallows the fallen deity whole, punishing him with his own past. Just as the resistance is about to deliver the coup de grace, the aliens interfere. They strap a containment device device onto the target, stealing the execution right out of the human's hands. But despair takes hold of everyone. The ultimate straitjacket, designed specifically to hold him down, is torn apart by him as if it were paper. Ignoring his enemies, the Plutonian's obsession shifts to a newly revealed source of magical power on the battlefield. He sees it as a chance to undo his sins. Blinded by his quest for absolution, he decides to force a miracle. The former hero overloads the artifact with his own power, attempting to activate the restoration magic by brute force. Except the fantasy crumbles. There are no millions of resurrected people, leaving only the same desolate wasteland and the victims trapped in the nightmare he created. The grim truth hits hard. The magical energy didn't revive anyone. It merely altered the survivors' minds to worship him in an artificial, programmed way. Unable to process the failure of his redemption and the falseness of their affection, his sanity shuts down. The most powerful man in the world collapses and accepts living the lie. And that is when true reality sets in. The fake miracle never happened. The alien technology worked flawlessly, and the most dangerous being in the universe is trapped forever in a mental simulation of his own guilt. The mental simulation wastes no time on the Plutonian. The fabricated scenario projects humanity's pure hatred, rejecting everything his image ever stood for. But the illusion quickly shifts its strategy, bringing down on him the weight of the people's past devotion and trust. Being reminded of the unconditional love he destroyed proves to be lethal psychological torture. The relentless adoration of this lie acts as a powerful anesthetic for his mind. The most destructive being in existence gives in, becoming a willing prisoner of his own vanity. Meanwhile, in the real world, humanity receives the final verdict. Like an absolute certainty implanted directly into the survivor's subconscious, everyone realizes that the global reign of terror is truly over. The intergalactic pact is sealed with no turning back. The invaders collect the price of the agreement, taking the villain away and confirming their definitive withdrawal from Earth. Euphoria overtakes the survivors, but Cubit does not share this relief. The moral weight of the drastic decisions he had to make to force this outcome crushes his conscience. What no one expected is that the Plutonian's redemption fantasy would bleed from his mind back into the physical world. The massive mental energy channels the collective grief to alter Earth's reality. The process defies the laws of physics, creating a miraculous restoration amidst the rubble. The geography previously wiped out by the monster's fury is forced back into existence, raising entire structures anew. With the planet physically stabilized, the scramble to fill the power vacuum begins immediately. Survivor seizes the opportunity and takes charge of the situation, assuming global leadership. To consolidate his historic moment, the new leader establishes a definitive new timeline for the planet. It is a masterful political maneuver designed to permanently tie his own image to the salvation of the world. Cubit refuses to let Survivor dictate the rules unopposed. Bypassing the imposed surveillance, he initiates the activation of clandestine technology to force a stealthy neural connection. The target of this deep mental connection is Modius, confined within that host body. The entire coordination of this counterattack must take place in the shadows, where not a single sound can compromise the plan. On the surface, the new benevolent leader's mask finally slips in front of his allies. Survivor makes it clear that he intends to monitor humanity's every breath, establishing a ruthless totalitarian surveillance state disguised as protection. Far from the political chaos on Earth, the intergalactic captors alter the containment protocols. The most dangerous prisoner in the universe is prepared for the next phase of his confinement in space. Without the psychic suppressors, his godlike biology awakens, but his apathy is absolute. The mental break was so devastating that even his most basic instinct of self-preservation has been completely wiped out. Seeing that the prisoner shows no reaction, the guards drop the maximum security protocols. Earth's former untouchable god is summarily thrown into the slaughter pit of the prison system's general population. The humiliation by the worst monsters in the galaxy soon begins. The being who once laughed at entire arsenals now puts up no defense, accepting the brutal assault in complete lethargy. What started as an attack turns into a merciless mob lynching. The one who played judge, jury, and executioner with humanity is now crushed in the dirt by nameless creatures, surrendering his body to destruction. As he is battered and torn apart, the final rupture in his consciousness occurs. Unable to cope with the pain and sheer horror, his mind short-circuits. He plunges into a pathetic hallucination, taking refuge in the delusion of being the perfect, beloved hero. Within his own shattered mind, Tony finds the perfect refuge. He retreats to his golden age, taking on the role of the flawless savior once again. In this private universe, his actions never result in collateral damage. He erases the devastating and unpredictable consequences that ruined his life in the real world. The ultimate reward for him isn't just saving the day, it's adoration. He fabricates human gratitude, completely ignoring the reality in which the entire world despises him. But outside this trance, the truth is pathetic. The administration of an intergalactic prison is baffled to see that their newest inmate has built an impregnable fortress inside his own brain. With his mind shut down, his indestructible alien body is thrown into a mass trench for forced labor. The all-powerful Plutonian now mines ores side by side with cosmic scum. While Tony is enslaved in space, Earth tries to erase the former tyrant from history. The streets become a stage for humanity to purge years of submission and fear. Seizing the void left by the old gods' fall, the hero known as Survivor steps into the spotlight. He understands that the world desperately needs a new beacon to restore its faith. Through flawless PR maneuvers, he quickly solidifies his image. Survivor becomes the true successor and humanity's beloved new protector. But the genius Qubit refuses to buy into this blind euphoria and confronts the new hero. He exposes the fact that Survivor has the means to find his missing twin brother, but simply turns a blind eye. The brutality of this revelation shatters his unshakable savior persona. The hero is exposed as a man consumed by jealousy, willing to abandon his own family over a one-sided romantic obsession. To ensure Survivor cooperates with his plans, Qubit plays his final card and threatens to expose a dirty secret from the hero's past. Earth's untouchable protector realizes his newly earned reputation is hanging by a thread. Swallowing his rage, he realizes he has no way out. He is forced to yield to Qubit's blackmail and accept this forced alliance to keep his heroic status intact in the public eye. Far away, the prison planet's infrastructure reveals its true power. The complex features a core generator capable of simulating the gravitational pull of a black hole to oppress the inmates absolutely. To demonstrate this monstrous control, the administration activates extreme gravity. Beings with colossal destructive power are instantly crushed against the floor of the mines. Amidst this mass crushing, a single individual remains entirely unaffected. Tony continues oblivious to the collapse around him, his mind disconnected from his body and fully immersed in his heroic illusion. But the external gravitational anomaly is so intense that it manages to bleed into Tony's mental hallucination. For the first time in his private refuge, his flawless flight control fails drastically. The physical interference completely corrupts the delusion, and his imaginary invulnerability gives way. The simulation of a perfect world crumbles the instant he gets hurt and causes collateral damage within his own mind. Tony's mind suffers a total collapse, locking into an unbearable and silent trauma. The superpowered god is now nothing but a shattered mind, trapped in a prison of psychological horror. In the real world, the system registers a massive resistance anomaly. Panicking that something isn't yielding, the prison warden ignores protocol and cranks the gravity to maximum to obliterate everything living in that sector. The mass execution sweeps through the mines, turning the site into a brutal graveyard. But the monumental force that annihilated the other prisoners begins to be pushed back by something that breaks the planet's very laws of physics. The Plutonian awakens from his catatonia, completely ignoring the force that decimated the others. He defies the oppression and rises, ready to show the prison's wardens the exact reason why Earth fears him so much. Tony isn't going to simply flee. He decides to turn his escape into a massive retaliation against the planet that tried to destroy him, leaving a clear message. But unleashing so much energy at once triggers a violent sensory collapse. His mind begins to buckle and fail under the weight of his own power mid-attack. Out of brute force options, the prison administration activates a bizarre contingency. They use his own genetic material, stolen during his torture, to create a countermeasure. An interference invades Tony's mind, taking the form of a trusted old ally. It's a psychological play tailor-made to disarm his fury. The manipulation works frighteningly well. Believing himself to be safe, Tony yields to exhaustion and accepts the false peace injected into his brain, shutting down all his defensive instincts. The mental illusion masks the real danger perfectly. While his mind projects relief, his physical body is submerged in an ultra-high-density neutralizing compound. The compound reacts and hardens rapidly. The most dangerous being in the universe is once again reduced to an inert, fully immobilized package. The planetary extinction crisis is contained. The administration breathes a sigh of relief, ensuring the prisoner is once again just a subdued and controlled asset. Even so, keeping him on the planet is deemed an unacceptable security risk. The order is given to dispatch his chamber into deep space immediately, outsourcing the problem. Far away, the alien crew transporting him reaches a critical limit. The energy drain required to contain the prisoner is absurd, putting everyone on board in mortal danger. The prison's gravitational anomaly-based engineering breaks the laws of physics. The existential weight of their cargo tears through the fabric of space, turning their progression into an agonizing crawl. The gravitational pull generated along the journey decimates entire planets in their wake. The attempt to save the universe from the Plutonian becomes a silent mass extinction event. Faced with imminent death and no point of return, the crew doesn't panic. They embrace their own destruction as a noble and necessary sacrifice to contain the threat. In a cold-blooded move, the alien empire decides to drop the prison directly into the heart of a superheated star. They're betting on the forces of nature to obliterate the threat. The crew hastily abandons the system, fleeing their own trap. They are convinced that sinking their burden into the plasma inferno will solve the problem once and for all. Inside the sinking prison, absolute panic crushes Tony's arrogance. Stripped of his gifts by the restraints, the sheer terror of human mortality takes its toll. But his execution is interrupted by an impossible anomaly. Someone finds a breach in the isolated system and invades Tony's mental nightmare at the exact moment he breaks down. The mysterious figure surrounds him with mental guarantees of unrestricted protection. The savior leverages his trauma to forge a bond of codependency and absolute loyalty. The masked figure preys on Tony's despair to consolidate his ownership. He establishes himself as Tony's sole anchor of safety, manipulating the former god into surrendering total control of his life. Consumed by a visceral need to understand his own fate, Tony tries to claw back some answers. He risks pushing past the limit, desperate to see the face of the one who bought his soul. Meanwhile, in the physical world, the alien's mathematical projections fail brutally. Contact with the star's core triggers a monstrous anomaly that defies all the prison's technology. The security barrier suffers a catastrophic collapse. The entire system designed to nullify the prisoner's consciousness and powers is shattered by the solar flames. The worst-case scenario materializes in the heart of the thermal chaos. The extreme shock shatters his lethargy, and the Plutonian rises from the ashes of his own tomb, completely uncontained. The weight of their failure crushes the alien crew. They realize the hard way that in trying to incinerate the apocalypse within the sun, they've only set him loose once again. Tony was rescued and taken to a sanctuary far beyond our solar system. Away from Earth, he is now under the absolute control of those who saved him from death. While his physical body heals, Tony's consciousness creates a nostalgic refuge. He dives into deep memories, reliving the time he desperately tried to pretend to be just an ordinary guy. But the disguise always had to slip. That uncontrollable instinct to be the savior takes over the memory, forcing the violent transition from a mild-mannered man into the living legend. Back in the reality of his space captivity, Tony accepts his new place in the universe. He lets his old identity die and allows himself to be anointed as a deity by these creatures. However, these people's worship crosses a bizarre line. Their blind reverence turns into an unexpected physical neediness, entering a territory of intimacy that catches him completely off guard. Meanwhile, back on Earth, a desperate gambit takes shape. The planet's worst criminals are now the primary workforce, rebuilding the foundations of society. To prevent betrayals, the leader, Survivor, needs absolute guarantees. The telepathic hero Burrow's mission is to get inside the heads of the planet's worst killers and certify that they are truly cooperating. And what he finds inside the villain's mind is pure nightmare fuel. The criminal consciousness is a cesspool of twisted instincts, revealing a hostile environment of degradation and savage violence. Reality hits Burrows in the worst possible way. He realizes his sanity will be offered as a sacrifice, as he'll be forced to dive into the rotting minds of all the other criminals on the base. Far away, Tony seeks refuge in another mental memory. He relives an intimate moment where he used a civilian disguise for a romantic date in a desperate attempt to experience a normal life, until the perfect scenario proves to be a macabre illusion. All the intimacy was just a mental invasion orchestrated by his archenemy, Modius, who had been manipulating everything from the start. The shock of the betrayal shatters the hero's rationality, triggering pure panic. Disgusted by his own violated mind, Tony destroys the illusory environment in a brutal escape to end the humiliation. Back on Earth, the mental toll of scouring corrupted minds destroys Burroughs' sanity from the inside out. To Survivor, the telepath's agony is just a nuisance, treated with mockery. Secretly, the inventor Cubit issues an ultimatum. He promises to ease Burroughs' suffering, provided the telepath performs an unauthorized reading of Survivor's own mind. The impact of the telepathic revelation is devastating. By accessing the secret, Cubit confirms that the new leader's intentions are far worse and more lethal than any paranoia could have anticipated. Following the discovery, Cubit outlines his strategy: keep his head down and feign obedience. He decides to play along with the leader's twisted plan without raising suspicion, but plans to ensure the safety of his ally, K-Don. But the protection arrives too late, and K-Don has already been ambushed. The hero's brutal capture confirms in the worst way that Survivor's corrupted plans are already in motion. In space, after his mental breakdown, Tony's reality changes drastically. The aliens abandon their worship and adopt a cold demeanor, turning him from an untouchable god into a mere patient under clinical observation. Violated by the physical tests, the superpowered being's reflex is ruthless. Emotional instability turns into immediate aggression, resulting in the instant mutilation of the alien touching him. Out of patience to deal with the consequences of his actions, Tony ends his stay by smashing everything. If the place no longer serves as a sanctuary, he'll tear down the facility's walls to get out. The outside reveals a terrifying truth. That facility wasn't on a distant world. It had been dropped into the scorching core of a star, designed to be absolutely inescapable. To make matters worse, he discovers he isn't the only inhabitant of that stellar hell. A new presence emerges to confront him, making Tony's already fractured mind doubt its own reality. Paranoia reaches its peak. With his pride wounded, he glares at the stranger and demands to know who orchestrated such a humiliating maximum security prison for Earth's greatest criminal. The stranger's answer is the finishing blow. The universe doesn't see him as a conqueror or a relentless threat to the galactic intelligences. Tony is just a profoundly sick patient locked up in a cosmic asylum. The psychological torture begins. The interrogator decides to deconstruct the Plutonian's mind, throwing exactly how he perceives his own tragedy right in Tony's face. He exposes the unbearable truth. While humanity was allowed to make mistakes, Tony was held to an impossible standard. A single slip-up was enough to wipe out a lifetime of good intentions. With decades of perfection thrown away and the world turning its back on him, the breaking point was inevitable. If they were going to treat him like a monster anyway, he decided to embrace the role. This explains the current situation. Since Earth couldn't handle it, they outsourced the problem, leaving the fallen hero to rot in an interstellar asylum with no way out. But then comes the twist. The figure torturing him reveals that he isn't a warden, but rather a guide who had infiltrated Tony's mind long before this imprisonment. The final revelation is heavy. The voice belongs to Modius, his arch-nemesis. The villain has a lethal fixation born of a sick love, and now, ironically, he is the only person who can get him out of there. Meanwhile, the search for the Plutonian continues in the real world. Cubit goes straight to the leadership of the alien race responsible for his abduction to demand his whereabouts. The aliens try to intimidate him, but Cubit shows them who's boss. With a single command, he sabotages their entire invasion fleet, using the fact that their alien technology was stolen from him. With the upper hand entirely on his side, he delivers the ultimate ultimatum. Either they hand over the coordinates to the Plutonian's prison right this instant, or the Empire's entire military infrastructure will be shut down. The blackmail works, and the coordinates are handed over, but Cubit harbors a dark secret. Once he saves the Plutonian, he plans to return and annihilate this race once and for all. Back at the intergalactic asylum, Tony and his escape partner gear up for action. With the Allies' identity now revealed, they must put their differences aside. The Ally lays down the true terms of their partnership. The math is purely pragmatic. Two beings of absurd power working together have a much higher chance of escaping that hellhole. With no way to fly blindly into space, the strategy changes drastically. The Ally explains that they need to head down, as the asylum's true infrastructure is buried deep below. The objective becomes clear: invade the headquarters at the planet's core. There, they plan to hijack the Warden's transport system, the only way out of that solar system. However, the planet's maximum security detects their movement and the retaliation is instantaneous. The The Wardens deploy heavy weaponry specifically designed to sedate planetary-level entities. Instead of backing down, Tony turns the bombardment into a brutal opportunity. With his colossal strength, he shatters the crust, tearing through the ceiling of a lower holding cell to create the perfect chaos. The escaping horde attacks the guards, but the distraction draws out something even worse from the shadows. One of the deadliest inmates ambushes the duo, unleashing a sonic wave that paralyzes the nervous system. The extreme pain nearly breaks the Plutonian, but he refuses to be contained. Focusing all his hatred, he fires his heat vision at point-blank range, eliminating the target lethally. But the descent soon exacts an even heavier toll. Before they can even catch their breath, a colossal abomination from the Mad God's sector intercepts their escape, striking the Plutonian with a devastating impact. For the first time in a long time, Tony's invincibility fails. He freezes completely, and the genuine panic of seeing himself as prey takes over his mind. The creature lunges in for a merciless kill, and the one forced to watch his own nightmare come true is Modius, watching the being he loves get torn apart, completely powerless to stop it. Modius decides to reveal the Plutonian's biggest secret. The universe always believed to be the apex of alien biology is, in fact, something much more dangerous. Pure psionic power. His famous heat vision and the rest of his arsenal don't defy physics for nothing. Tony simply forces the acceleration of surrounding molecules until they turn into superheated gas. Even his flight and brutal super strength are unconscious manipulations. He projects his mass into the atmosphere to glide and stiffens his own molecules to become harder than diamond. In his mind, Tony is just an incredibly strong guy. But if one day that psychological barrier falls and he realizes he can rewrite reality itself, the universe won't stand a chance. To guarantee an intellectual monopoly over this discovery, Tony's greatest rival acted with extreme coldness. He implanted a neural virus that erased this revelation from his own memory every time he deduced it. Meanwhile, in the real world, the former hero uses this exact unconscious atomic manipulation to face a colossal abomination. The desperate escape from the prison planet gains momentum when he uses the creature's own weight against it. But the bizarre nature of the planet itself is part of the containment. The surrounding flora is a living organism designed specifically to stop any prisoner from advancing. The relentless alien biology penetrates Tony's body, seeking to incapacitate him entirely. It is a paralyzing terror that invades his mind and shatters any illusion of invincibility. The trap operates mercilessly, tearing the former hero apart in the cosmic prison. Simultaneously, back on Earth, the vacuum he left behind creates an even more distorted reality. In this new world, criminals toast to the new global dictator, a former hero who took control. For this scum, it was much more profitable to embrace tyranny than to try and fight. However, the regime's illusion of stability cracks when the intelligence network brings bad news. Two key pieces of the empire vanished in a surgical kidnapping, leaving no trace. Paranoia consumes the global leader, who disguises himself to test the waters. With lethal calm, he sits next to his own telepath and corners him before a secret can leak. Desperate and subservient, the subordinate swears blind loyalty to the boss. The leader receives the submission with sadism, knowing that fear is the perfect leash to keep everything under control. While chaos dominates Earth, Tony's mind floats in a confusing limbo on the prison planet. Under the effect of the alien trap, he desperately tries to get his bearings. An anchor appears in the form of a powerful memory. Tony realizes he was thrown back to the exact day that defined his existence, the moment the world met the Plutonian. The memory revives the chaotic scene of an instant tragedy. Without thinking twice, Tony dives into danger and makes a cold calculation to rescue those who still have a chance of surviving. Facing a colossal disaster, he opts for the impossible solution, demanding the absolute maximum from himself. Tony takes the full impact and decides to be the crowd's shield. The maneuver works, and the great hero is officially born. But what embeds itself in his soul isn't the good deed, but the intoxicating ecstasy of feeling like an untouchable god at the epicenter of destruction. The delirium gains focus when the memory brings the first real gratitude he received. That face proved that the Plutonian had an unquestionable purpose as a savior, sparking his addiction to approval. Suddenly, the reality check hits without warning. The comfortable memory bubble is burst by an emergency call, forcefully dragging Tony out of the past. Back in the reality of the prison planet, survival instinct takes control. breaking the biological hold that paralyzed him, he awakens to continue his frantic escape alongside his partner. Frustrated by the humiliating mental invasion, Tony adopts a scorched earth policy. He channels his anger into an attack of pure fury to prove he is still the dominant force there. With the path clear, he switches from aggression to tactics in order to escape that hell. Through pure intimidation disguised as diplomacy, Tony takes the lead and recruits what is left of the threat. To his escape ally, he gives in and confesses the delirium. Tony acknowledges that the prison hacked his mind using precisely his deepest need for approval as a weapon. While racking his brain trying to decipher the enigma of his vision, Tony ignores the truth. Ironically, he remains blind to the sick, invisible manipulation orchestrated right under his nose. Tony and his group cross paths with an alien entity suffering from delusions of grandeur. The creature stands in their way, demanding absolute submission and proclaiming itself the supreme deity of the realm. But Tony quickly figures out the psychological puzzle. He realizes the display of power is nothing more than a maddened prisoner's defense mechanism, and decides to simply ignore the threat. This dismissal wounds the creature's ego, sparking an impulsive reaction. Without warning, it uses the environment itself to try and swallow the heretic's whole. Instead of relying on brute force to retaliate, Tony taps into his ability to rewrite matter at an atomic level. He drastically alters the physical state of everything around him. The execution is ruthless. Without a shred of remorse, Tony pulverizes the obstacle and its lackeys, sending a brutal message that his patience has run dry. And the truth behind what remains is stomach-turning. He restructures the organic matter, recreating his old suit through the sadistic biological recycling of the beings he has just massacred. Meanwhile, on Earth, the torture imposed by Modius reaches inhuman levels. The brutal confinement forces Beta to endure the unwanted company of a personal tragedy. The pain of knowing the presence beside her is merely a corrupted, soulless shell is unbearable. It strips away her last ounce of hope for a true goodbye. The psychological torture forces her to relive the past. She recalls the peak of their toxic love triangle, where the Plutonian constantly needed to prove he was the team's alpha predator. Tony's egocentric strategy shattered any illusion of choice. He rigged the emotional game all along to make himself look like the only divine option for Bet. Back in the present, grief triggers a bizarre accident. Bet's attempt to use her powers goes terribly wrong, dragging the essence of Carrie's deceased brother back into reality. But the spiritual truth is pure nightmare fuel. The ghostly anomaly is in such absolute agony that its only lucid desire is to be wiped from existence once and for all. Far away, Tony's rescue mission descends into an alien hell. The chaotic physics at the planet's core distort the very fabric of reality the deeper the group goes. Cubit realizes the crazed prisoner's delusions are actually a trail. The psychic bleed originates from the mind of the target they came to rescue, turning the local monsters into their only reliable compass. To prevent the voices within one of these monsters from revealing his hidden identity, Tony decides to intervene. In his twisted mind, inflicting extreme pain on the creature is the best way to silence the noise. The oppressive environment soon takes its toll, and Tony's mental disguise begins to slip. A spark of instinctive suspicion ignites within Carrie, suggesting there is something terribly familiar about the man. The tension breaks when they stumble upon another inmate having a breakdown. She is locked in a frantic trance of self-mutilation, completely oblivious to the newcomers. Tony soon understands the truly diabolical mechanics of the woman's power. The damage she tries to inflict on herself isn't nullified, it simply seeks a new host in the surrounding environment. Upon neutralizing her, the hostile environment triggers an unexpected side effect. For the first time in a long while, Tony's invulnerability falters just enough for him to feel genuine physical touch. But the planet offers no reprieve. A sudden massive energy blast obliterates a monster hunting them, the shockwave sweeping the entire team off their feet. Their local guide panics at the shooter's relentless power. With his invulnerability compromised, Tony experiences something incredibly rare and terrifying: the raw fear of becoming prey. While chaos unfolds on the surface, the prison administration goes into high alert. Security protocols are activated to try and contain the colossal invasion that just breached the system. The guards' preparations are utterly useless. Their barricade is instantly dismantled by a brutal force that wipes out the defensive line before they can even pull their triggers. The threat's identity changes the entire game. Modius strides through the wreckage with a single, obsessive goal: to find the exact location of the Plutonian. Tony tries to take leadership of the survivors on a prison planet. With his powers limited, he runs into the natural distrust of the inmates, who refuse to follow a rookie. The real danger comes from a prisoner whose blows generate temporal anomalies. The impact is so violent that it obliterates the target before the physical strike can even be comprehended. To subdue the threat without brute force, Tony uses the sadistic mind of another inmate. Her disorder acts as a mirror, projecting suffering directly into the attacker's mind. Kneeling and completely overwhelmed by the phantom pain, the brute begs for mercy. The mere threat of prolonging the invisible torment breaks his spirit and guarantees total submission. With the hierarchy established, Tony promises to lead the aliens to Earth. He sells them on human despair and the thrill of inflicting pain to fuel his new army's cruelty. He decrees that the group will rule the new world, but one detail catches his attention. The math for the travel seats doesn't add up. Someone there is dead weight, and Tony already knows who won't be boarding. Tony's target confesses his true purpose. He isn't an ordinary inmate, but a telepathic asylum parasite created to sedate dangerous minds with comforting illusions. Paranoia wins out, and Tony executes the creature without hesitation. Someone who walked through his thoughts and knows his worst traumas could never be an ally, making him an unforgivable security liability. Meanwhile, deep within the base, Modius and Cubit corner the prison system operators. Acting under duress, they make it clear that they demand a planetary scan for Tony immediately. The villain's twisted obsession finds its voice in the corridors. For Modius, the former hero is the very definition of absolute perfection, being the only entity in the universe worthy of his affection. Tony's new alliance breaches the control room's defenses. The inevitable clash brings the destruction-thirsty prisoners face to face with those trying to prevent the disaster. Being the master manipulator he has become, Tony embraces Modius's usefulness and blind devotion. With a confirmed guide back home, he seals the brutal invasion of Earth. With passage secured, old alliances completely lose their value. Tony decrees Cubit's death sentence, unleashing the irrational fury of the Horde to eliminate the one mind standing in his way. But the scientist's final action is executed first. A device drastically alters the structure of the battlefield, violently removing the greatest imminent threat from the equation. The maneuver exiles the invading Horde through the folds of reality. The worst criminals are thrown into random holes in the universe, ensuring our world's survival at an extremely high cost. Only the four remain in absolute confinement. Cubit's only solace is accepting eternity alongside the greatest threat in the universe, ensuring the monster will never harm innocents out there again. Tony's final play is brilliantly cruel. He realizes that the prisoner with temporal powers left behind has the gift to rewrite the mistake, and orders the timeline to be shattered. The intervention hits the target like a brutal rewrite of reality. The anomaly tears the timeline apart, ripping the consequences of Cubit's sacrifice right out by the root to satisfy the petulant god. When the dust settles, Cubit realizes the massive collateral effect of the anomaly. Forcing the temporal rollback generated a paradox that simply wiped the entire army of alien prisoners out of existence. Modius's mental collapse is immediate and brutal. Seeing the perfect plan he took so long to orchestrate get crushed by the reckless impulsivity of his supposed god shatters his sanity. In the midst of all this disaster, the Plutonian couldn't care less. The paradox cost him his army, but the dimensional rift served its purpose of taking him to Earth. Humanity's nightmare restarts now, and it's far more personal. The acting president knows the weight of the world just fell into his lap. He needs a moment to process the drastic decision he is about to make. In his address, he opens the statement by picking at humanity's deepest wound. Reminding everyone of the recent nightmare is the perfect tactic to justify his new plan. He then plays his final card and announces the sale of national sovereignty. The country will be carved up for foreign investors in exchange for resources to survive. But as he speaks, defense bases go into shock over a terrifying visual confirmation. The absolute nightmare wasn't left in the past, and the realization that extinction has returned consumes all hope. From space, the Plutonian intercepts global broadcasts. He discovers that humanity is trying to rebuild and form alliances without him, and decides to give them a brutal reminder of who dictates the rules. The former hero strikes, and the planet's very topography begins to change. The attack tears through the country with brute force, physically dividing the nation in the blink of an eye. Millions of lives are decimated before they even understand what hit them. The great international economic agreement dies right there. buried alongside the nation's future. To ensure the message is unmistakable, he carves a definitive mark of ownership into the Earth's crust. The emblem serves as a statement visible even from space, reminding them that Earth is no longer free. On the streets, faith in heroic figures dies completely. What little civil order remained crumbles, and society decides that trusting superpowered beings was the greatest mistake in history. At the Paradigm Base, the group of heroes descends into absolute chaos, knowing they've become targets of both the people and a maddened god. Their leader, Survivor, desperately tries to maintain control as panic spreads. Watching his leadership evaporate, Survivor plays his last card to calm the team. He assures them the situation can still be salvaged and lies, claiming that Cubit, the group's greatest mind, has already devised a foolproof strategy. Far away, the Plutonian demonstrates how broken he truly is. Plunged into severe apathy, his only desire is to feel some emotion again, whatever it takes. He turns to one of his new alien allies, but the stimulus fails, and his frustration turns into lethal fury. He attacks her mercilessly, proving that no one's survival is guaranteed around him. Desperate not to be executed on the spot, she begs for her life. As a final bait, she offers to fulfill the darkest and most hidden desire the former hero harbors. Without warning, the nightmare takes physical form inside the Paradigm Base. The Plutonian invades the place, bringing his new Praetorian guard of alien psychopaths. The first lethal strike hits an ally head-on, sealing the tragedy in front of everyone. The sudden death firmly establishes that there is no more resistance, only a slaughterhouse. With no time to hesitate, Survivor demands that the team's telepathic advantage be used right away. Trying to predict the former hero's next move is the only spark of hope they have to make it out alive. But the mental connection backfires in the worst way imaginable. What goes on inside the Plutonian's mind is such profound madness that the telepath's mind simply shatters. He flees in terror, abandoning his comrades. Lacking tactical intelligence, the team launches a frontal assault, but the result is catastrophic. Earth's resistance begins to be easily dismantled, highlighting a grotesque difference in power against the invaders. While the heroes are being massacred, the Plutonian spills the missing truth. His return was facilitated by Cubit. The betrayal of the Paradigm's greatest mind is served cold. The lie Survivor told to maintain the team's morale instantly falls apart. What little trust was still holding those heroes together turns to dust in the midst of the attack. Cornered and hopeless, the planet's greatest defenders stage a pathetic civil war in their own base. The global mission is forgotten, and they turn on each other, driven by internal vengeance. Aware that the main battle is hopelessly lost, the leader deserts and begins a race against the clock. He needs to intercept the telepath and extract the secret he discovered in the enemy's mind. Survivor finally catches up to him, but arrives too late, as the fugitive chose death over dealing with the truth. The Paradigm's only real chance to understand the enemy's weakness has just been erased. Watching all this, the Plutonian finds a sickening level of satisfaction. Seeing his former colleagues not only fail, but destroy themselves from the inside out, validates his twisted worldview and becomes his greatest entertainment. The telepath's death brings no relief, only fury. Survivor cannot accept that the pressure drove their only advantage to suicide, and the group's fragile alliance reaches its breaking point. The retaliation plan turns into pure shock when the group he was trying to save suddenly disappears. They vanish without a single trace, defying the logic of that place. A silent panic takes hold of him. The realization that the instant annihilation of his allies was the work of an absurd force makes the hunter understand he was always the prey. Far away, the true threat continues moving relentlessly through space. What appears to be a harmless cosmic phenomenon is, in fact, the approach of an absolute reckoning. The fractured mind of this invader completely distorts the reality of the genocide. He doesn't see himself as a monster, but as a deity seeking validation from repulsive creatures for his carnage. The sadistic purpose of his visit becomes clear shortly after. The intention is surgically calculated to prolong the terror and savor the breaking of an old companion's spirit. The end is abrupt and with no chance of defense. No bargains are accepted, and the execution turns into a monstrous display of physical superiority that wipes out any resistance. Back on Earth, the futility of the entire defense system becomes evident. The cold acceptance that no army is capable of stopping a furious god marks humanity's final surrender. Despair makes the greatest geopolitical rivals swallow their pride and unite. Faced with absolute apocalypse, money and old borders mean nothing anymore. The old government paranoia proves justified. In the midst of the crisis, they activate a global panic button, engineered decades ago only for the worst-case scenario. but the cost of this doomsday weapon is devastating. To save the planet, the leaders must authorize the planned extermination of a third of humanity. It is accepting the role of the villain to survive. While the fate of billions is sealed, Bête Noire decides to ignore the collapse. In a bubble of pure decadence, she faces the end of the world, being pampered like royalty. But reality quickly invades the bubble. The sanctuary shatters, and a chilling feeling warns her that her luck has run out and consequences have caught up with her. It's not a random attack, but a surgical execution. An assassination attempt in the past secured her the top spot on his revenge list. Bête finally breaks down under the guilt. She confesses to being responsible for the shot, blames the massacre on his silence, and begs to be executed at once. But death would be too easy a relief. He chooses psychological torture. The torment is only interrupted by a desperate intervention. The psychological game is broken by a stealth attack focused on preventing the worst from happening. The cruelty of the captivity she was subjected to went far beyond physical assault. To emotionally destroy her, the villain used the reanimated corpse of the great love of her life as a macabre jailer. But her deep grief became her escape weapon. Diving into her memories, she managed to break the barrier of death, pulling her partner's essence back to the physical plane. Sustaining this protection hit a limit. To ensure survival against the maddened god, she had to inject dense and corrosive emotions into the mental link. Bête's desperate gamble paid off. By corrupting the soul of her own ally, she unleashed the furious spirit against the enemy and created the distraction she needed to escape. The truth behind this manipulation is foul. She implanted false memories, making the spirit believe his own brother was the mortal enemy, thus securing her escape. Free, her plan takes her straight to Gilgamesh's hideout. She swallows her pride and admits she's only there because extinction is knocking at the door. But the giant hero has already thrown in the towel. Bitterness over the past makes him prefer rotting in his own misery to getting involved in another suicide mission. To shatter his apathy, Bête plays her last card. She presents the corrupted ghost as undeniable proof that she has taken responsibility for the war. The ghost, however, brings more than just warnings. It carries the key to victory, a colossal secret that had been hidden right under the team's nose. The entire history of the untouchable duo was a sham. Their public biology was just a charade to cover up the perfect weapon against the collapse. The final revelation drops. There is a third piece on the board. A dormant power has just awakened, becoming the only viable hope to save the world. 10 years ago, morality felt like simple math to these three siblings. They raided the underworld, believing the line between good and evil was clear, and that their very presence was salvation incarnate. But youth paired with absolute power breeds recklessness. By cornering desperate criminals with nowhere to run, they lose control of the situation, and tragedy goes from a mere possibility to a chilling inevitability. Reality finally hits after the bloodbath. The weight of causing so many deaths out of sheer stupidity crushes the illusion of flawless heroism they had built. Disgusted by the cowardice of having godlike advantages against mere mortals, one of them makes a drastic decision. He disowns his own blood and turns his back on the team, plunging into absolute isolation. His desperate search for redemption leads him to bury his identity. Instead of hovering above humanity like a superior being, he chooses to live in voluntary squalor, trying to atone for his sins in a humble and invisible way. Years later, accepting that his penance hasn't erased his flaws, the illusion of the monastery shatters. Forced out of his bubble, he must finally face the reality of the world he abandoned to its fate. The scale of the shock is overwhelming. The regret he nurtured for a decade in a basement means absolutely nothing in the face of the lethal extinction-level event that swept the globe in his absence. Utterly lost amidst the chaos, he is confronted by the one who answers his call, but without any mercy. The architect of the end of the world appears in person, bringing with him all the tension of a final judgment. The monk reveals the parasitic nature of his bloodline's power. The death of one strengthens the survivors. Upon hearing the confirmation of his brother's deaths, he knows such a calculating entity would never pay a visit just to mourn. After the entity departs, the former vigilante tries to comfort survivors, but his old ally Carrie shatters the peace. He exposes the harsh reality that the mere approach of someone with superpowers now triggers absolute panic among civilians. Carrie rubs salt in the deepest wound, placing the weight of the entire apocalypse squarely on his former allies' shoulders. He points out that their early intervention could have prevented the mental breakdown that doomed the planet. the ultimate strategic advantage comes to light. Carrie explains that with the energy recalibrated after the deaths in the family, the scales have tipped. If they fight together now, they have enough brute force to cancel the apocalypse. But the monk's true terror is finally confessed. He doesn't fear dying in battle. He fears his own soul, believing that any kind of absolute power is a one-way ticket to psychological ruin. Having zero tolerance for excuses, the verbal provocation escalates into a physical ultimatum. Carrie initiates a test of pure aggression, not to win a fight, but to forcefully break his partner's vows of pacifism. Pinned to the ground, the former hero's last mask falls. He admits that abandoning the mantle was never a spiritual quest, revealing the exact moment he felt his empathy die, and confirming that his inaction was pure panic and self-preservation. The standoff reaches a logical and grim conclusion. Since he refuses to return to the battlefield, there is only one way to transfer that vital energy to someone willing to fight. The bitter reality is swallowed, and the irreversible absorption process begins. The mystical sacrifice is consummated with the monk giving up his own life to secure the world's salvation. On another battlefront, far from there, Betty decides to risk it all. In an act of pure desperation, she launches a blind attack against the genocidal deity itself. The colossal power gap is rubbed in her face. Any physical obstacle is wiped off the map instantly, proving that human brute force is completely useless against him. Instead of killing her, he uses their shared past of complicity as a mental weapon. He decides to humiliate any trace of resistance, turning Bet's bravery into a cruel joke. To make the global scenario worse, he formalizes a bizarre new world order. The tyrant outsources the terror, giving carte blanche for the worst psychopathic minds to turn Earth into a playground of chaos. Faced with this authorized anarchy, world leaders come to the cold conclusion that the survival of the species demands catastrophic sacrifices. It's the acceptance that the only way out is to embrace an unthinkable decision. A morbid consensus prevails at the summits of power. Indiscriminate horror is accepted as a valid price to pay to eliminate the threat in the sky, and humanity's doomsday is finally authorized. Far below the surface, the monitoring technicians of an ultra-secure base have no idea that the global execution order has been activated. The biggest crisis for them is still their alienated subterranean routine. But when the superpowers protocol reaches critical mass, the macabre realization comes to light. The target of this lethal alliance isn't the enemy in the sky, but the military complex itself, whose defenses have been deactivated by the governments. The combined might of the nations rains down mercilessly from the sky. The world's entire firepower is concentrated on this single isolated point, ensuring maximum precision annihilation. Under extreme pressure, the limits of the foundations give way. The base caves in from the inside out, pulverizing everything stored underground and completing the strategic sacrifice. However, the entire unleashed arsenal proves useless against the energy that the monk's sacrifice released into the base. From the epicenter of the bombing emerges Carrie, with the power transfer complete, becoming an unstoppable and monstrous force the world was not prepared to face. The attack didn't have the expected effect. Whatever was trapped inside the secret facility survived the bombing and is now forcing its way out. The secret hidden for decades is finally revealed. From the ruins emerge two colossal entities, now completely free from their ancient chains. The planet's geography means nothing to them. The duo begins a relentless march across the globe, altering the very forces of nature simply by existing there. In classified reports, governments uncover an even greater nightmare. The newly freed entities share a direct genetic link with the world's primary antagonist. The base's obliteration triggered a terrifying chain reaction. The winds are already carrying a brutal toxic storm, sweeping across entire continents before any warning. As the world collapses, the surviving heroes search for a miracle. They discover the existence of a third heir to an ancestral bloodline of power. With the cosmic power redistributed after team casualties, this reclusive brother has just received a colossal upgrade. He becomes the only piece capable of facing the global threat head-on. To cross the globe in time, a dangerous alternative is brought to the table. The heroes decide to use the underworld itself, the realm of the dead, as a dimensional shortcut. The infernal crossing ends, but delivers a macabre scene at their destination. The enemy's carnage has already reached the location, turning everything into a veritable open-air slaughterhouse. They find their embittered target, but the reunion is dominated by resentment. The being of near-divine power makes a point of showing absolute disdain for his visitors. Meanwhile, an ambush cuts off any escape route for a prisoner. It becomes clear that this encounter was no accident, and that one of the two won't make it out in one piece. The invader's motivation is revealed to be terrifying. The goal was never assassination, but to turn the woman into the perfect vessel to dominate Earth's main villain. The mental invasion ruthlessly crushes the host's consciousness. She is forced to yield total and absolute control of her body to the parasite. With the possession complete, the satisfaction is immense. Inhabiting the body of someone trusted, the parasite now holds the key to accessing and manipulating the most devastating force on the planet. Back to the heroes. The attempted alliance becomes untenable. Out of diplomatic options, the team is forced to cross a line and take extreme measures against the powerful recluse. With a god complex awakening, the heir makes an irreversible decision. He concludes that the only salvation for the planet is to seize control of everything himself as a new dictator. Humanity cannot allow the rise of yet another tyrant. The threat is lethally and ruthlessly neutralized by the team themselves, nipping the delusion in the bud. But the execution hit a much crueler intention. The mystic leader reveals the plan to force the newly released energy into a new submissive host, creating a devoted puppet. However, arrogance exacts an instant price. The forced transfer fails catastrophically, brutally destroying the body of the vessel that was supposed to become the ultimate weapon. As a consequence of the mistake, the life energy dissipates forever. The team realizes they committed murder for nothing and have lost their last hope in the war. As the resistance crumbles, the world's main antagonist decides to act. He sets out to directly confront the cosmic anomalies that are destroying his territory, but the most feared offensive on the planet is nullified as if it were nothing. The difference in hierarchy is laid bare, revealing that he has challenged an incomprehensible scale of power. The humiliation intensifies as he is immobilized in midair against his will. The former apex predator is treated like a rebellious insect before the entities. The revealed truth rewrites the entire history of the apocalypse. The colossal creatures he tried to destroy are the very source of his power, marking a disturbing and dark family reunion. Humanity bitterly remembers the time when Tony was the greatest symbol of hope. He was decorated and treated with almost divine reverence, considered the salvation of the world. Until the dream shatters, the most trusted man on the planet turns his back on those he swore to protect, crossing a line of no return. When a god decides to exterminate mortals, the carnage is absolute. Millions fall as the world exhausts its arsenals trying to stop him, but all attempts fail miserably. The massacre is only interrupted when cosmic anomalies invade the planet. Tony refuses to accept them and resorts to pure brutality. But the anomalies neutralize the hero with frightening ease. For the first time in his life, Earth's most lethal being is contained, unable to do absolutely anything. The punishment for the mass murderer is an incomprehensible nightmare. The entities drag him to the end of time, exactly to the moment the universe dies and there is no more energy. This is the perfect prison. In the absolute void where entropy itself has devoured everything, the destroyer god is condemned to spend eternity paralyzed in the darkness. Knowing he won't escape paralysis and a slow death, Tony gives up asking for freedom. Instead, he focuses on what matters most and makes one last request for eternity. Before losing his mind, he demands to know the absolute truth about his own essence. It is the question that has tormented him since his first day of life. The entities decide to grant the answer and reveal that they are the Elios, immortal beings who travel the multiverse with the sole purpose of studying life forms. They explain that, decades ago, they tried to study humanity. To do so, they sacrificed parts of their own cosmic energy and created a living probe. As soon as the probe was unleashed on Earth, the experiment went wrong. The energy was instantly hijacked by the most anguished and desperate mind within a radius of miles. That woman's emotional burden crushed the original programming. The cosmic energy was forced to physically mold itself to the desires of that sick mind, transforming the probe into a human baby. The worst part is that the desire that created Tony wasn't pure. That woman only wanted to escape her own guilt and needed a replacement for the son she herself had just murdered. Over time, the boy's cosmic and indestructible nature began to leak out. His biology operated on another level, and his abilities simply couldn't be hidden. Seeing this broke the woman's mind once and for all. Instead of salvation, the existence of that indestructible baby became a nightmare and a constant reminder of her original crime. At the peak of despair, she decides to end it all silently and lethally. She creates a makeshift gas chamber, asphyxiating herself and the son she had come to see as a monster. The woman finally meets her death, but the boy's cosmic biology rejects the asphyxiation. He survives an impossible scenario, only to wake up in a completely abandoned world. Rescued without an identity, his fate becomes that of any orphan child in the foster care system. A brutal cycle begins, where he is thrown into an endless sequence of temporary homes. But as soon as his powers accidentally manifest, the family's protective instinct turns to panic. What should have been a son becomes a threat, and he is returned multiple times. After years of rejection, a switch flips. Tired of being feared just for existing, Tony decides he will justify that terror and give the world a real reason to be afraid. He begins using his brute strength to cause destruction and pain. But what truly scares him is that, amidst the chaos he creates, he experiences a dark pleasure. To keep from going insane with the crushing guilt that follows, he makes a drastic decision. He locks those toxic instincts deep in the back of his mind and creates the mask of the hero and perfect boy. Back in the present, in the vacuum at the end of the universe, Tony turns the tables. He throws it in the entities' faces that if he is a genocidal monster, it is the fault of his celestial creator's negligence. A disturbing realization then hits the entities. They realize they guided Tony's mind only to show him the moment of his birth, not this entire dark retrospective of his childhood. The truth comes to light. Somehow, impossibly, even paralyzed, Tony has taken control of his own mind. He hacked the mental connection and now dictates the rules of the game against his very own creators. In the void at the end of time, the creators realize something terrifying. The Plutonian's mind isn't just resisting, it's evolving rapidly. He begins to reach their level of cosmic consciousness. To contain this advance, the entities blast a brutal reality check straight into his mind. It's a violent and immediate psychic reprimand. They need to remind him who's really in charge on that plane. But in a bizarre way, he loves the punishment. Tony confuses this oppressive discipline with fatherly affection and begs to keep being controlled. All this God ever wanted in life was boundaries. Faced with this submission, the creators finally reveal the truth about the past. They explain that when they arrived on Earth, they underestimated human paranoia. They didn't realize they were being hunted by the governments. They explain the cruel detail of the trap that imprisoned them. The containment field didn't hurt the aliens, but it was absurdly unstable. If they tried to move a single millimeter, the detonation would wipe almost all human life off the map. The irony is that humanity itself caused their release. When humans realized they couldn't stop the Plutonian, they manipulated Tony himself into destroying that prison. Understanding everything, the entities acknowledge that Tony comprehends sacrifice and the greater good, but they know he didn't learn empathy on his own. Now, they decide to invade his mind to find out who taught this god to be human. Sifting through his deepest memories, the creators find the turning point. They visualize the boy's last foster home. It was exactly here that the being of infinite power began to be shaped. In the memory, his new father decides to confront the anomaly head-on. Instead of kicking him out, the man imposes non-negotiable rules. He takes on the colossal responsibility of trying to tame a god in the making. This upbringing is based on relentless discipline and absolute denial. The child is taught that if he has the power to save the world, he has no right to basic pleasures. Any and all indulgence is nipped in the bud. Even what seemed like a gift turns into a nightmare in the boy's mind. It was just a meticulously calculated psychological test. The joy is ripped from him the exact moment he tries to smile. However, in the dead of night, the hypocrisy reveals itself. The boy sees that the man who preaches sacrifice harbors a poisonous grudge. He secretly hates the people he helps, finding the world ungrateful. The continuous training purposely fractures the boy's identity. Half of him will be the reclusive human, the other, the untouchable deity. The concept of having a normal life is erased forever. The creators move forward through his mind and find the end of this family. A lethal accident claims his parents' lives. With no witnesses, it's the closure of a traumatic chapter. He confesses to the aliens that this tragedy was a liberation. Without his father to watch his every step, an invisible anchor was cut. The burden of expectations died along with the couple, bringing a grim relief. Free, he builds an illusion so perfect that he even manages to live out a romance. He finds a partner who looks at him and validates the unreal perfection he tries to project. But one person still knew the truth: his former foster brother. That same boy who used to humiliate him at home was now a grown man. He carried the secret of all of Tony's pent-up rage. Resentment and spite turn the brother into a monster. He embraces extreme criminality and is born as the villain Max Damage. His sole purpose is to ruin the hero's flawless life. In his fights against the villain, Tony always held back at the last second, not because of an intact moral compass. What paralyzed him was the genuine terror of finding out how much he would enjoy killing him. Seeing all this, the aliens finally put together the missing pieces. The scan exposes the root of the supposed hero's fractured mind. There are no more secrets. The psychological evaluation is complete. Back in the present, Tony surrenders to a transformation that strikes his body and soul. He believes he's evolving and shedding his human weight. For the first time, the feeling of belonging to his true lineage is absolute. However, the creator's rejection is brutal and absolute. Instead of being welcomed, he is discarded without the slightest ceremony. They treat him merely as an experiment that needs to be swept into oblivion. The terrible truth comes to light. The restructuring of his body was never a gift. It was the implementation of an unbreakable containment protocol. What he thought was evolution was, in fact, the creation of a custom-made cell. His freedom is revoked, and the isolation becomes absolute. With no followers to idolize him or family, only a silent void remains. He is left to be consumed by eternity in the inescapable trap of his own mind, until an intervention arises from where he least expects it. Former rivals cross dimensional barriers, offering an escape route. A final chance to return is brought to the table through a dangerous pact. Cubit explains how he managed to do the impossible to get them off that prison planet. The escape didn't rely on brute force, but on rewriting the very laws of reality from scratch. To do this, he used a prisoner who carried a dormant gift for distorting the flow of time. Cubit breaks down all of his allies' biological barriers, pushing the limits of this ability. Pushing his companion's life force to the absolute limit of exhaustion, he tears a rift in time. The goal is to bring future versions of himself to work in the present. His obsessive genius pays off, and the teleporter project is completed in record time. They finally secure their long-awaited ticket back home. But the victory is short-lived. Upon crossing back, they discover that the world they left behind has become a landscape of pure chaos. Humanity faces a death sentence. A lethal, invisible, and unstoppable wave is sweeping across the globe, ensuring the absolute contamination of the planet. Tony, the Plutonian, reacts to this apocalyptic bombshell with total apathy. To the broken-souled former hero, the extinction of billions sounds like a mere bureaucratic detail. His power and invincibility were never biological. All along, his unstable mind has been distorting the very fabric of the universe, bending reality to his subconscious will. Cubit's math for finding a way out is cruel. The only way to reverse the global extinction requires the exact cooperation of the monster who nearly destroyed them. To curb the Plutonian's fury, the perfect bait is cast. Cubit promises to use the temporal rift to undo the mistakes of the past, offering a chance at redemption. With the truce forged, an insane excavation takes them to the absolute depths of the planet. They seek a forgotten ancestral resource to purify the poisoned soil. In the depths, they find the impossible, the Garden of Eden itself. The plan is to use the fruit from the Tree of Life, the origin of Earth's biology, to force a reset on nature. For this to work, Cubit begins intensive and lethal training with Tony. The former hero must set brute force aside and act as a conscious manipulator of matter. To prove that the laws of physics are irrelevant, the Plutonian nullifies gravity on a celestial scale. He rewrites motion and matter through the sheer force of thought. The critical moment to apply this knowledge arrives. Tony uses his newfound understanding to mold the Earth's crust like clay, building the necessary containment. The impossible engineering takes shape, creating a colossal purifying filter that breaches the atmospheric layers. The goal is to drain the radioactive poison into the vacuum of space. But the harsh reality hits Cubit like a punch. The data reveals that the monumental effort and global engineering were absolutely useless. Despair takes over as the radioactive anomaly begins to devour the Plutonian himself. Not even his newly awakened godhood seems to be enough against the lethal environment. Searching for a cure, Cubit tracks the radiation back to classified experiments from the military's past. The poison was created with the sole purpose of destroying Tony's reality manipulation. Scouring the files, he discovers the project was designed by Modius. The sociopath is the most dangerous and obsessive enemy the Plutonian has ever had, and the truth is terrifying. Modius survived the prison escape by transferring his consciousness into one of the survivors, infiltrating the group all along. The revelation hits the Plutonian like a meteor. Knowing that Bette, the woman he fanatically loves, is vulnerable, despair and instinctive panic take over. Blind urgency causes him to ignore all limits. The sheer force of his departure shatters the city's foundations in a wave of mindless, impulsive destruction. Alone and with a clear path, Cubit reveals the dark truth of his journey. The promise of time travel that convinced the Plutonian to help was a fraud. The final tragic twist unfolds. The Time Guardian was already dead long before the deal. The entire alliance was a game of extreme manipulation by Cubit in an attempt to save humanity. The survivor endures a personal hell, his mind bombarded by an unbearable noise that destroys any shred of sanity left. Left with no alternatives and consumed by agony, he accepts a macabre pact with Modius. In exchange for mental silence, he agrees to become the killer of his own friends. The sinister truth is that Modius orchestrated everything from the very beginning. He planted this torture in the hero's mind simply to sell a false cure and forge a loyal assassin. To capture the Plutonian, Modius also set a trap in the past, forcing the brutal extraction of an innocent test subject's energy far beyond its limits. All this physical agony was meticulously refined and bottled up, converted into a deadly ultrasonic weapon ready to strike. Back in the present, the trap works perfectly. Completely blinded by rage, Tony charges straight into the sonic ambush. The humiliation is instantaneous. Earth's most feared being loses control of himself, sucked in by a crushing force without the slightest chance to react. The great twist is revealed. Modius violated Bette Noir's mind and took over her body, forcing the heroine to unlock her full gravitational potential to crush Tony. The illusion shatters when Tony recognizes his greatest enemy's sarcasm. He realizes the colossal scale of Modius's obsession to reach him. The grotesque motivation comes to light. Modius confesses he parasitized Bette specifically because he knew about the secret desire the Plutonian always had for her. Taking advantage of Tony's shock, Modius forces a profane intimacy, playing psychological games by using the face of the woman he had always desired. Far away, what is left of the paradigm resorts to desperation. They seek out the immortal Gilgamesh, the last living legend on the planet, begging for a miracle against the apocalypse. Gilgamesh shatters the group's illusions. He explains that the gift of immortality is a curse, freezing the soul and forcing the person to merely exist without ever evolving. But for Cubit, the ethical dilemma loses its meaning. The genius's cold logic dictates that a stagnant, miserable existence is still mathematically superior to the total extinction of humanity. What they don't know is that the survivor, now a puppet under Modius's mind control, secretly intercepts every detail of this conversation. Meanwhile, trying to locate Tony, Cubit stumbles upon a massive gravitational anomaly and gambles his own life on a blind jump straight into the center of the storm. At the epicenter, Tony's shock gives way to pure revulsion. With an explosion of instinctive violence, he rejects his attacker and shatters the physical hold restraining him. But the escape doesn't last a second. Modius immediately blocks any escape route, making it clear that this fight will only end when he decides. To keep the god trapped, the cosmic cost is apocalyptic. Billions of lives are instantly extinguished on the other side of the universe just to sustain this crushing pressure. The most lethal being on the planet is reduced to dead weight. Tony's invulnerability is useless, and he is treated like a mere trophy dragged along by the villain. Then comes Modius's sick proposal: abandon Earth to its fate and head into the unknown, turning this violent domination into a kind of romantic exile. Tony has the ability to launch a lethal counterattack, but the trauma paralyzes him. Modius uses this hesitation as a weapon, mocking his enemy's inability to hurt Betty's face. This final blow destroys the former hero's mind. Being brutalized behind the mask of the only person he ever cared for annihilates his sanity, leaving only an absolute void. Survivor wages a silent war within his own mind. The alien consciousness sharing his body fights desperately to corrupt his instincts and take control. The invading entity changes tactics and resorts to pure paranoia. The intentions of the group around him are twisted, planting a deadly seed of distrust and betrayal. The mental manipulation successfully achieves its goal. Blinded by the newly planted illusion, Survivor completely loses control and cowardly attacks his own ally, shattering the team. With no conventional way to stop this power, a weapon of absolute psychological trauma is unleashed against him. The goal is to short-circuit his brain through primal terror, but the countermeasure comes at an irreversible price. The hero's rational mind is wiped out, leaving in its place only an alien force driven exclusively by the instinct to exterminate. Far away, the true architect of the tragedy savors his victory. Modius destroyed the mind of the most powerful man in the world just to fulfill a deeply sick and sadistic desire. But his delusion of omnipotence is abruptly cut short when Cubit takes control. He uses teleportation to fragment Modius's presence across several simultaneous locations, incapacitating the villain. With the threat temporarily subdued, an illusion falls, and the confirmation of Betty's tragic fate comes to light. The pain of losing their teammate turns the atmosphere into pure, vengeful fury. Worse still, the shattering of the illusion reveals that the enemy's backup plan was already in motion. Thousands of innocent lives are ruthlessly obliterated in a split second. Simultaneously, another battlefront deals with the consequences of the collapse. The enemy reveals himself to be a transmitter for a psychic virus, threatening to infect and devour the sanity of everyone on the field. To prevent the mental spread, Sai makes a drastic decision and severs ties with his partner Kadon. He accepts his own end, an absolute sacrifice to shield her mind from the infection. Armed with the clarity of this sacrifice, Kadon turns her vulnerability into a weapon. She crosses the dimensional border on purpose, dragging the corrupted entity along to end the nightmare. Meanwhile, the naivety of thinking the main threat was over costs Cubit dearly. Modius not only survived the teleportation extraction, but has already taken control of a new host. It is then that the villain lays bare his bizarre obsession. All the carnage and global manipulations were just a macabre spectacle to impress and win the approval of Tony himself. Modius decides to break the pacifist scientist's ethical rule through sheer psychological torture. The pressure is so immense that Cubit gives in, confessing out loud that he wants his enemy executed. Believing he has won, Modius takes the bait and attacks his rival's mind. He fails to realize that Cubit's contingency plan involved turning his own consciousness into an irresistible trap. The checkmate is perfect and silent. Cubit turns his own mind into an unbreakable isolation cell, neutralizing the villain forever from the inside out. He reveals that he needed the criminal mastermind imprisoned, yet alive. Modius is the only being who understands the lethal radiation about to wipe out Earth, and Cubit needs to steal that information. By accessing the data in the villain's mind, Tony pieces together the apocalypse puzzle. Modius manipulated Bête Noir's latent powers to control dark matter and poison the atmosphere. The solution requires Betty's residual essence to be used as a sacrifice. Her energy must be converted into a colossal magnet capable of absorbing all the radioactive poison. The execution falls to Tony. He will have to carry this gravitational anomaly and sweep every inch of the planet, risking being crushed by a miniature black hole. To ensure the former hero takes on the suicide mission, Cubit reinforces a deal. Tony will save the world in exchange for time travel to rewrite his crimes and finally achieve redemption. But upon reading the scientist's data streams, the former hero discovers something disturbing. A dark and closely guarded secret is uncovered before the mind could be shielded. Fury overtakes Tony instantly. Feeling betrayed, he attacks with extreme violence, shattering any illusion of trust that existed in the Alliance. The painful truth is exposed. The entity that would serve as a battery for time travel was already dead. The promise of redemption was just a farce to force him to cooperate. Cubit is not intimidated by the Plutonian's fury. The inventor makes it clear that if he merely wanted revenge, he would have already acted. The plan is much bigger and more complex. The fallen hero's patience runs out. Tired of word games and manipulation, he decides to silence Cubit with sheer brutality, but the imminent threat of death doesn't scare the inventor. He reveals that Earth is just minutes away from being destroyed by lethal radiation, making any revenge pointless. To ensure his executioner's submission, Cubit presents a mysterious object. He confesses that for the first time in his life, he crossed the ultimate line and committed murder. The Plutonian instantly panics upon recognizing the substance. It is the only material in the universe capable of piercing his invulnerability. And then comes the line that completely turns the tables. The murder Cubit confessed to didn't happen in the past. The man poisoned with this lethal material is the Plutonian himself. The detonation is controlled by Cubit's mind. If the inventor dies or even loses concentration, the substance will explode. Obedience is now a matter of survival. With the leash perfectly tightened, Cubit reveals the mission. Tony must use his maximum speed to sweep Earth's atmosphere and vacuum up all the poisoned radiation. Left with no alternative, the Plutonian takes off. He pushes his body to the limit, acting as a giant living vacuum on a planetary scale. The frantic sweep reaches epic proportions. He crosses continents and oceans in a near-suicidal maneuver to ensure not a single pocket of poison is left behind. But biology has absolute limits. The absurd amount of toxicity absorbed causes Tony's once unbreakable body to enter a critical state of overload. The effort takes its toll, but the gamble pays off. Sensors confirm the threat has plummeted, and Earth has just been saved by its greatest nightmare. However, the return is far from triumphant. Turned into an unstable bomb after sucking up the toxicity of the entire globe, the Plutonian's body collapses and plummets from the skies. The impact on the ground is devastating. All the accumulated lethal energy crashes against the surface with overwhelming brutality. For the first time, Tony realizes with terror the end of his control. The energy violently devours him from the inside out, leaving the all-powerful being powerless in the face of his own mortality. Cubit approaches for the final verdict. The collapse is irreversible, as Tony's body was the only vessel in the entire world capable of withstanding and containing that anomalous payload. The realization tears through the Plutonian's soul. He realizes that the promise of redemption was a perfect trap and that he was coldly manipulated into committing suicide. But the scientist changes the rules of the game once more. He explains that the promised absolution was never for Tony's physical body, but for the living conceptual force that inhabits him. Tearing through the very fabric of reality, Cubit honors the agreement of salvation. He purifies the villain's corrupted essence and sends it into the multiverse, offering infinite possibilities for a fresh start. That embittered god is undone. Tony's physical existence ends there, in a violent rupture necessary to pay for his sins on Earth. Meanwhile, the purified essence travels through the absolute void. Freed from trauma and madness, it is now just raw potential navigating the dimensional currents. Breaking through the final barriers, the spark penetrates a completely new reality, an infinitely more peaceful world, without super beings or great cosmic tragedies. The energy doesn't seek a warrior, but strikes the mind of an ordinary teenager dead on. The impact generates a colossal epiphany, an idea that demands to be expressed. Driven by an uncontrollable instinct, the boy wakes up his friend in the middle of the night. He urgently needs to put that brilliant inspiration on paper. With passion, he describes the ultimate champion, a being with unimaginable powers, yet driven by an unshakable goodness, the exact antithesis of the monster the Plutonian was. And the multiversal irony comes full circle. The essence of that dimension's worst villain was purified until it became the literal spark that inspired the creation of Superman in our world. The cycle of redemption was an absolute success.